Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Midnight's Edge. I am Tom Connors. With me, as always, is the boss man, Andre.
Greetings, everyone.
Also joining us is Rob, the voice of Midnight's Edge. How you doing, Rob?
Ho, 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 speak 'em up.
Also joining us is the Script Doctor. How you doing?
I am well. Thank you for having me tonight. How's it going,
The movie
everybody?
we're discussing could have used a Script Doctor.
Indeed.
Not to bury the lead, we're going to talk about Wonder Woman 84. I think maybe we'll start off the first few minutes, try and stay spoiler-free, just giving initial kind of reactions, and then we'll probably jump into spoilers. But chances are, if you guys have not seen it already, you know. Anyway, Andre, why don't you kick us off here?
Well, to begin with, I can say that I thought that the first Wonder Woman movie was quite okay. And with this one, obviously, we knew a little bit about what the story was going to be. We had kind of broken it down before. But still, of all of us on this panel, I was the one that said, yeah, well, it's not going to be a great movie, but at least it might be an entertaining one. I have no problems admitting when I'm wrong, and this was one of those occasions. The movie had some redeeming features, but on the whole, this was a mess that honestly the writers should have like just scrapped the script, thrown in their paper basket, and tried over again. Because like, how did this get the green light?
Well, I mean, I guess without getting too much into the whole spoiler aspect of it, let's be clear here. I think it's pretty obvious to all of us. The only reason they went with this kind of a storyline is just so they had a way to bring Steve back. Like, that was really, I think, the main point of this whole convoluted thing we'll get into here.
And the irony, he wasn't even any good in it.
Really? I thought he was the best part.
I thought that the trailer was good. I liked the trailer, but in retrospect, it was just the music. It was just like the trailer song that made it good, like New Order. That was the whole thing. That was what made it good. Without that, and in context, none of this was any good. Not even Chris Pine.
Well, and Spider Unlimited sends us $9.99, says, I literally found Batman and Robin more entertaining. I think I said something similar the other night, Friday Night Tights. We'll definitely get into that. Roger Haynes, thank you so much for a super sticker to kick us off. He sends us a thumbs up. It would help us if you guys out there hit your thumbs up as you are listening to us here. That would help the algorithm know that people are watching. So,
and also greetings to those of you who are watching already. So greetings, Max Mercer. Greetings, Stussy. Greetings, Christian Garcia. I see we have some familiar faces here. Greetings, both Spider Unlimited and Roger Haynes. Let's see, who else? Oh, Alexander Vidakovic is here. Represent Serbia. And Fobro 1983 says the Wonder Woman 84 was amazingly mediocre. That's something that I absolutely can say that. Oh, and Robert, he has something that sums up it here. Orange Wish Rock bad.
Now, before we get too far into this, Rob has never actually seen the first Wonder Woman. So
no, but I kind of have. I know the story. I know the story, the legend. You know, man crashes on an island full of beautiful women, and that's plenty of adult movies have started that way. But but we're not gonna go there. So, but as much as we'd like to, and boy, we'd like to. So anyway, he's on the only single guy on the Club Med, and alternative women's lifestyle, weekend getaway island. So,
boy, you really need to watch the first movie. That's not what it is.
What am I? Wait a minute. Well, that was the version I saw.
No. Part of that was true, but no, like
you mean that? But there was this other movie I thought was really good. It was with Tobey Maguire, Michael Douglas, and oh man, based on the Michael. It was actually the one thing that Michael Chabon wrote that was actually pretty good. That was actually a pretty good movie. But unfortunately, yeah, that's the only thing that has in common with this movie is the word wonder. So But oh boy. But yeah, this movie was bad. It was bad.
Well, so yeah, so basically what I was leading to before you even gave your reaction was you actually went into this fresh-eyed. You had nothing to really compare it to. You didn't love or hate the first movie. You just hadn't seen it.
Yeah, it's
'Cause, you know,
yeah. I just I never got around to it. That's all. I'll give you a little bit more insight though to a couple things I thought about it later. But yeah, with no skin in the game, or no dog in the fight, whatever you want to metaphor you want to use. Yeah, this was not good. It was, I mean, really. I said we waited all this time for this. Really?
now I personally didn't care as much for the first film. I didn't hate it, but I didn't think it was a very great film, especially one worth waiting that many years for a Wonder Woman film. Script, how did you feel about the first movie?
Yeah, it was kind of a little underwhelming. I understood where Warner Brothers was in a bind because they didn't want it to look or reflect too much to Captain America, even though the story of Wonder Woman is she's supposed to be in the Second World War, but they went earlier to the First World War. I'm still, I mean, I adore Gal Gadot, but I don't think she's the best choice for Wonder Woman to play the character. I think that she's a little green in some parts, and I don't think she has the proper team around her to get the best out of her, especially in these types of movies. I felt the third act was kind of tacked on. I think Patty Jenkins has been horribly mistreated with regards to Wonder Woman, not like intentionally, but just they're not giving her the support she needs in order to branch out and really stretch her skills for directing action. I think they're doing the actions separately and then handing it over to Patty and saying this is what you have to work with, which is not ideal for a director, especially one that's getting into this type of area of filmmaking. So I think that's a disservice to her because I actually enjoy the few movies that she's made prior to Wonder Woman, and the writing is it's kind of panicky, a little lazy. It's not thought out. One of the hardest things we've been dealing with in our entertainment over the last 20 years is a fundamental misunderstanding of realism with regards to films. They try to take our reality as a template and then manipulate the fiction to fit into that, as opposed to just giving us the effort in regards to the fiction to create its own reality that is familiar to what we understand so that we can buy into it. And that's something that I had issues with the first Wonder Woman, with a bunch of the Snyder films of his Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, and it continues with this one in Wonder Woman 84. And so it's not ideal.
Andre, what did you feel about the first film?
Well, as I said before, I thought it was okay. It was
I think
nice
you said
fun.
that before we started, though.
Yeah.
So just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. No, I thought it was fine. I didn't love it, but I didn't mind it in any way. There were parts of it that I really enjoyed. I liked that it basically it wasn't woke, if you will. It didn't feel the need to trash anyone. She was Wonder Woman without that having to go at the expense of anyone else. So I thought the first Wonder Woman was a good movie. Not a great movie, but a good movie. This one here, not so much.
Yeah. Here's my thing that's kind of weird, and will kind of feed into jumping into Wonder Woman 84 is that I liked the movie up until the third act in the first film I'm talking about now, but I feel like that third act could have been fixed with one little thing, and that was if they would have made Ares her father. And that would have then fixed why, her mom kept her past so secret and why she was always trying to keep her, down and not let her use her powers in that first movie, because all that's going to be important in the second film. And like I said, that one little fix would have helped that first movie out, because it would also explain why war continues to go on after she kills Ares, because Ares is supposed to be the god of war. And that's the whole point, is if she kills him, war will end. Well, we know that's not the truth, because how many different wars have we had since World War One?
So
Right.
Tom, you really wanted you wanted the ending to more resemble the Maury Povich. So Ares, you are the father.
Well, what it would have done is necessitated, her being around would, it would have been like, okay, war is going to continue. And then she would feel guilty because she's the goddess of war now. But then that would give her a reason to get involved whenever there's a war.
Makes sense.
But again, then we're going to run into the same issue here with part two. There's one fix at the end I think that could have helped it, but this one is beyond fixing. Like I don't know if there's anything in this that could have fixed it. I think Andre's right from the start, just tossed it out the window and started from fresh. Like, yeah.
Yeah, there was no salvage here.
But yeah, the thing I think that would have fixed this movie, not to jump too far ahead, it'll have to do with Maxwell Lord and his son. So when we get to that, I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, now that we've gotten past the first film, and obviously I think it's kind of it's sad we don't have anybody on the panel who actually liked the movie, but I think it's pretty obvious already none of us really cared for the movie all that much. Now, I think there's varying degrees to what we disliked, and I know there are some things we did like. But I guess overall, let's start with our first impressions. Rob is gone.
No, I'm muted. Overly long, boring, tedious, difficult to watch. Really was. You could have trimmed a good half hour, maybe even an hour from this movie. You could have trimmed. Yeah, this is a case where this felt like a director's cut. It really did. It felt like a director's cut without a theatrical version at first, because all the long, boring stuff that it just felt so self-indulgent. Like, why are you flying a plane through fireworks? Really? I mean, that kind of stuff. Ooh, wow, cool. I'm like, that is like a special features deleted scene. That should be a special features deleted scene. It slows the film to a crawl. A lot of things just slow the film to a crawl. I mean, this could have used another pass in the writer's room. It really could have. Yeah. Script, where were you? Come on, man.
Well,
this is why we're counting on you to do.
I'm not even sure that would have fixed it, Rob. Because, I
would have rewritten the whole thing, and then
that's what I'm saying. Like, you almost had to start from scratch.
Yeah, as I said also, like the only fix right here was to take this script and just fold it into a little ball, throw it in the trash, and start over with a completely different idea. Because here's like the thing, like this thing right here, it would have been good for a comic book or for a what if cartoon. It was simply not fit for a big screen movie. Like you get like a Wonder Woman movie in theaters, every 3 years or something. And that means that every single movie is really precious real estate, and you have to be careful with how you choose to spend resources on it. Now, I have never read a Wonder Woman comic in my life, so I cannot suggest any better stories or anything like that. But what I can say is that this was an absolute mess, kind of like a dream thing. Like this is like the movie version of Super Mario Brothers 2, the Western version, where the whole thing was kind of like a total shift from what came before, a total shift from what came after, and kind of like dreamlike and a bit weird and everything like that.
Didn't even really start out as a Mario game to begin with.
Yeah, that's kind of like my point, that you'd kind of been better off like not putting this thing out in the marketplace to begin with.
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
The opening sequence, it felt like, they said, oh, it's going to take place in the 80s. I'm like, yeah, this does feel like the 80s. This feels like the kind of quality superhero movie that we would have gotten in the 80s. It just felt so like cheap and tacky. And
on that note, as David Adamechin says there, no, they didn't. But still, like the CGI here, especially in the intro, I saw this with my wife, and she pointed this out that the movie was ruined like 2 minutes in. Because it's like fine with the little girl Wonder Woman running in the hills of the Canary Islands, where it was very obvious to film. That's like all good and well, but then you get to like this CGI insert thing in the mountainside, and then really CGI insert aerobatics and jumping around in the air with the gravity being all wrong and everything. So it was like completely obvious that we're watching something fake here.
And mind you, this is the only IMAX scene in the movie too. Like the opening shot, like the opening bit of the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
Is the only IMAX scene in the movie, and it has some of the worst, like just Andre just explained, all some of the worst CGI I've ever seen. So I can't imagine seeing this on an IMAX screen.
It's
how
not
bad
just
it
the worst
was.
CGI. It's the worst wire work. It's complete like the stunt women, I think, are being pulled by the wires as opposed to being the wires there as a safety.
Besides Wonder Woman being OP for her age at that point, considering what we saw in the first film, yeah.
Yeah, the
That
other
was
part too,
another thing
like I
that
could
I
understand a kid outrunning an adult because kids are freaking fast, but like everything else that she was doing, no, sorry.
Well, that was kind of the whole point when she was like a teenager or whatever in the first film, is that they kept kind of keeping her powers at bay or whatever. Remember?
Yeah.
that was kind of ridiculous that she would be like. I had to remind myself, like, wait, she was like so much more powerful than everyone else, right? Because that's like the only way that I could kind of like even go with her running with them in the first place.
Well, and that's what I said about the first film. Making her the daughter of Ares would have at least given her a reason to be more powerful than the rest of the Amazonians. Why? Because she's half a god. That's why. Like that would have made sense. But anyhow, yeah, you start out with this big convoluted thing. But I'm going to tell you this, guys, right now before we get too deep into spoilers, because I think we're going to hit spoilers from here on out. We've passed the first 15 minutes, guys. I just want to say this in the chat real quick, guys. We know there's a scene where the sex scene. Let's not keep bringing up the R word in the chat so much, because I have a feeling that then it's going to trigger the Google bots. So let's just we'll talk about it when we get there, but let's just kind of avoid the R word for now in the chat so much, because I've seen it come up a million times now. So
yeah, that's let's not go there.
yeah, we'll get to that point in the film. We'll talk about it. Don't worry. But I just want to say this up front, because I was explaining the plot to somebody today, and I realized I was getting to the end of the movie. Kristen Wiig's character is completely fucking pointless to this movie. She has no reason to be here.
Yeah.
And I realized that when I got, like I said, damn near describing to the end of the movie, and I realized, oh yeah, by the way, Kristen Wiig is in this. And none of her story had impacted anything up until the end of the movie. So like right there is, I think, a big point of this whole movie is everything in this movie is just stupid. Doesn't really need to be there. It's over bloated. I feel like the wrong half hour of the movie was cut out, because there's so much stuff that's like paid off but never really set up properly. And again, they wasted Kristen Wiig. Whether she was a great character or not is up to you to decide. I thought she was horrible in it, and they should just cut her out all completely. They didn't need her.
It was just a costume test for Chitara when they do make a Thundercats movie. That's all it seemed to be like. I'm like, yeah, let's see if we can actually make a real life Thundercat. I mean, God, and her character is shit. You have to. Oh, what, you don't know what you've lost. I'm like, she hasn't lost anything. She doesn't have a character.
Yeah, I was wondering that too, because
Kyle, it's Edward Nygma is what she is.
Yeah. Because my point was like, when she wished to be the apex predator, she became like this animal thing, which is fine, I guess. But before then, when she just wished to be sexy and like Diana Prince in every way, she got it. And I don't see that she lost anything. Like she said, you lost your innocence, and you lost your cute smile, and you lost all the things that made you a loser to begin with. I'm like, how did that not work out fantastic for her?
Well, let's talk about the whole little transformation point there she has, where she actually does nothing. She literally does nothing, and then all of a sudden, every guy wants to jump her bones.
No, Tom, she bought a new dress.
No, she didn't. She took her fucking dress off. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you mean the morning after the wish, right? Yeah.
This is actually a really, really good point, because she took her dress off, and for many men, that's kind of, that's really all it takes. But it's neither here nor there.
She took the baggy skirt off to reveal her legs in the white spandex.
Whoop-de-doo.
And then walked into her office, and then all of a sudden people are giving her the looks again. It's like,
hey, looking good.
It's a change of. Yeah, it's a result to say like, oh yeah, the wish came true, and it just.
Yeah, but they don't need to do anything to show it. Like, okay, here's my point: is look at Batman Returns, this is basically ripping off, right down to the scene where her Gal Gadot bumps into her when they first meet. That's just the same way that Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne meet.
Well, yeah, when she gets jumped by one of the red triangle grinds, she drops all her papers, and
it could have been done a lot more subtly, and it could have been done a lot better. Throws a little wink here and there at some of your male coworkers. Hey, how you doing? Want to go for drinks later tonight? And she gives him a wink. Something different about you. Oh, well, maybe
Well,
we can
no.
discuss that later. You know what I mean?
Well, I was just gonna say, because like if you remember Rob in Batman Returns, Michelle Pfeiffer plays it perfectly. In the beginning of the movie, she's this mousy little hunched over, frumpy dress wearing, big glass wearing, hair back, tied tight, looking like, a secretary would look. But when she goes through that transformation, she goes all out. But she hasn't really changed, like just like Kristen Wiig, she hasn't really changed who she is or anything outside of her appearance, outside of makeup and her hair and stuff. But it's also the way she carries herself. Kristen Wiig doesn't do that here. That's what I'm trying to say. She does nothing to change her personality or anything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I agree with that. Like I said, and it could, like I said, it could have been done so much better. It could have been done. You could have done anything and haven't been so much better.
Well, not just that, you needed somebody different. Kristen Wiig is not. I'm not going to be mean here, but she's not really that attractive. And I don't mean she's ugly. I don't think she's ugly.
I don't think
she's not pretty.
Here's
but what
the thing.
I'm saying is she does not embody the type of character they were trying to get here. But you needed somebody like Christina Ricci or Charlize Theron. No, she was fucking horrible in this movie.
But here's the thing, though. She's attractive enough that if you could doll her up and make her more attractive,
it didn't work.
Yeah, but you're right.
I am with Rob on this one. That she's just right there in between, right? Where you can make her look pretty darn decent as they did, and you can also go completely the other way. I mean,
putting her against Gal Gadot, though. You can't do that. You could put her up against Melissa McCarthy, and yeah, fine. But against Gal Gadot, she's not. It doesn't work. No, you need somebody like Charlize Theron or
no, you don't. I disagree
do.
completely. No,
I disagree. I disagree.
But Tom, you can't have anybody upstage as a star.
Yeah.
That's you got to remember that. I mean, anybody. If you have Charlize Theron,
exactly. Rob is right here.
Yeah, you put Charlize there next to Gal Gadot, and all of a sudden Gal Gadot looks like Tuesday's leftovers.
I don't know about Saturday, maybe acting wise, but I don't know about looks wise.
You need to have someone that you can believe would want to wish that they were Gal Gadot, not like there's somewhere that's just out, but you can see how someone like Kristen Wiig, I think is pronounced, would want that. So I don't think that she was a problem here at all. I think that basically everyone in the movie were perfectly fine for what they were and what they had to do in the movie. The problem is the direction and the fundamental story. The person that we should talk about that really dropped the ball here is Patty Jenkins.
Patty Jenkins. I always ignore Tom. What do I always say about new directors? I always say something about
Patty Jenkins ain't a new director. She directed one movie 20 years ago and then did a bunch of television.
Well, but I always say new talent has to come from somewhere, right? And Patty Jenkins, yeah, granted, she's been around a long time. She's really never gotten the opportunity to direct a big budget movie until fairly recently. She directed Monster, which everybody loved. Mm-hmm. However, you know what? Maybe you need to go back and do a few more smaller scale films before someone hands you $1 billion franchise. And I'm looking at Star Wars Rogue Squadron as being real iffy right about now.
I kind of agree. I don't think that she did herself any favors here. I mean, they should be counting their lucky stars that AT&T basically decided to buy their silence by saying that, hey, you know what, we're going to pretend that this movie gets to $1 billion because there ain't no way in hell, even if there was no coup, if this was completely what everyone thought that this would be a year ago, ain't no way in hell this movie would have gotten to 1 billion. It would have started big, and it would have dropped hard. It would have dropped in a way that would have made The Last Jedi and Batman versus Superman look good by comparison. So they need to be thanking their lucky stars that things worked out the way they did, because they would never have gotten the kind of movies that they did here if market forces were allowed to decide how it fared in theaters. At least that's my point of view. Scripts, what do you think about that?
Uh, that's I kind of understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I think they wanted to make sure that they couldn't upset these two popular filmmakers, and decided to just sort of hedge their bets and say, hey, we'll give you this thing so you can't do anything else. I mean, uh, boy, there's a lot with this movie. I'm sorry, there's just a lot with this movie that irks me, and the politics surrounding it as well.
Oh, God, don't even get. Yeah,
I mean, I'll ask this one question: why did this movie have to be set in 1984?
that's a very good
That's
question.
yeah, and yeah, that'll get me to another part later on because there's actually like if you're gonna set it in this time period, and I'm gonna jump to a big spoiler here. Like the Maxwell Lord thing is he has to touch you because he wishes to be the stone, so he becomes the stone. So he has to touch you when you make your wish. Okay, so like he has this whole thing. He's like, if I do this one at a time, it's going to take forever and all this crap. So he tries to come up with a way to get everybody to do their wishes at once. And he comes up with this convoluted idea to use the Star Wars fucking satellites, and because particles are supposedly touching everything. You know what happened? What happened at about what was it, late 85, 86, sometime around there, Rob? Remind me something that happened where a lot of people held hands all at the same time.
Hands across America.
You had the perfect opportunity to feed into something that actually happened in history here.
Or is the Ramones? The Ramones went hands across your face.
Like all he had to do was like, I'm setting up this thing. I'm trying to make peace in the world. It would fit perfectly with his ideal of I'm trying to do this great thing for the world, on its surface, when actually it's him, trying to do this big thing that he's trying to do. Because the way it turns out in the film, it just does not fucking work. And we'll get to that, I'm sure. But like, yeah, that's the problem with this whole thing with being set in 84. I don't understand. There was nothing in it that made me feel like, okay, that's why they set it in this time period. Nothing at all.
Okay,
Zero.
you're gonna bring up the 80s. There's something when you bring it up later, I'll go to it. But the 80s actually has a very significant thing for me, but I'll bring it up later. But like you said, the whole thing, it just, and that was another contrivance though. That wouldn't have been feel as much as contrived, the whole hands across America, but the whole thing showing up at the White House. Oh, I just so happen to know someone who works at the White House and they could get you a tour. Oh, isn't that convenient? Didn't that work out very conveniently?
Well, we also have this problem where Wonder Woman's been around now for 70 years because she was around World War One, and she goes out in the middle of the day right away in the beginning of the movie and saves a bunch of people at the mall.
Yeah, but she tells them, shh, don't tell this.
Yeah, bullshit. What is this, Star Trek fucking Discovery now?
That's the same mall that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in Commando, right?
I don't know.
Much.
That's because speaking of the 80s, that's all I could think of. Like, oh, hey, where's Arnold?
Well, and let's talk about the fashion for a second here, because I'll tell you right now, this is one thing. This is an 80s movie set in an 80s movie. Like, because this is not the way the 80s were. Not everybody ran around looking like that. Like, that's the thing that I think is funny. Look at movies like Back to the Future, Gremlins, Beverly Hills Cop, all movies that came out around this time. Nobody dresses like that. And when they do, they get laughed at by Eddie Murphy, remember? It's like very few people dressed like that. It's just,
I'm waiting for the acid. I'm waiting for the acid wash jeans to show up. That's what I was waiting for. That's take it to a whole other level.
The early 80s weren't much different than the 70s, just without the bell bottoms. That's about it. That's really all they were. They weren't that fucking crazy. Like,
you know what it reminded me of? Overall, I think they did like a really good job with the cars and the wardrobe and stuff like that. But here's the thing: you remember back in Captain America: The First Avenger, towards the very end of the movie, after they have defrosted him, but they want to like give him a slow start. So like when he wakes up in the hospital, they've like decorated the room and they have like radio broadcasts from the 40s, and like the nurse comes in and she's dressed in something like in 40s clothes and everything.
She's in a military uniform, yeah.
But at the same time, you can kind of like tell that something is off, because she has like the makeup or something like that from today, even though she has like the clothes from the 40s, and that way you get like this uncanny valley, like something ain't right. And you had like that going in that one scene the whole time, and that was of course intentional, so that his alarm bells would like go off, like something ain't right here. And that's kind of like what I felt watching all of those sequences, that yeah, okay, like it looks good, but something ain't right here. And yeah, that's probably what you're
Yeah.
talking about, Tom.
And John Connors is saying what I'm saying. The late 80s and early 90s were when the ridiculous clothes, like a lot of those fashions they had in the movie were more later 80s, early 90s. Especially like the type of fashions that she was wearing and trying to get him to wear were definitely more late 80s, early 90s. So again, it was like, but not just that, like I said, they that's the problem with these movies, is it's like they make everybody look like, you know, I'm styling in 1984. You know, like not everybody dressed like that. You know, it's like even in Beverly Hills Cop, like I said, that was the one point. That's what's funny about that one scene is Eddie Murphy's walking down the street and he sees those two guys in leather and he's like, oh, because you know, only weirdos were around dressed like that. Like, not everybody did. It's just a few people.
Yeah, as big as Michael Jackson was, nobody wore the leather jacket with the chainmail on the shoulders. I mean, yeah.
Oh, just you wait. In 10 years or 20, 30 years from now, everyone is going to think that in 2015, everyone dressed like Lady Gaga.
That's the problem. That's the problem right there. They got everybody dressed like a fucking, you got half the people dressed like Madonna or Boy George or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, that's not the way everybody fucking dressed. You know, the movies that get it right are like the ones that just, you know, they just don't care about it so much. Like Stranger Things is one of the few shows where I've noticed they've really, either they just didn't really try so hard to make everything look so 80s in the fashion or something, but they just seem to get it right. I don't know.
But the thing is, though, in pockets of the country, people dressed like that. Maybe like in South Beach, in Miami.
No, but look at this
LA,
movie.
yeah.
You've got like a group of fucking punks walking down one side. Everybody, it looks like they're in a J.C. Penney catalog, or they're right out of a fucking either a punk catalog or a hip hop catalog or a what have you catalog of that time period. Like nobody is like outside of the time period in their clothing. You know what I mean? And that's not just the way, like, that's not the way fashion works exactly. Not everybody dresses the same. It's just dumb. Anyway, I've gone way too far on that.
Yeah, and again, I will just go to say that it's just one of the many, many issues, and again, far from the most serious one. But yeah, that's like the thing with the movie. There are like many of these things that, in and of their own, is like a minor issue, but when you add them up, they compound. And but the biggest one is that the entire story is wrong. But there were things that irked me about it, like also just like and script. I want your thoughts on this, because this goes to like the fundamental thing with the story, because they wanted the scene with the invisible jet, which is fine, but their way to get it was that Chris Pine's character, he has no passport. They have to get alternative transportation. And I'm like, okay, you just said that the guy whose body he inhabited was an engineer. Maybe he would have a passport. You'd kind of like think he would. Maybe like check the closet, check out his home. You've been there. You've railed his clothes and everything. Like, if you look a little bit more, maybe you'll find that passport. Maybe you'll be able to solve that problem. And okay, so fine, they need to get him in the jet. And then you have a guy from World War One who is suddenly able to fly a fighter jet.
From the 80s.
A fighter jet from, well, still a fighter jet from the 80s.
Very advanced.
Goddamn advanced.
Yeah. That's my point. Is like, look at it this way. My car is like not even 7 years older than my parents' car. I get in my parents' car, I feel like I'm going to blow something up if I push the wrong goddamn button. So there's no fucking way this guy coming from World War One can just hop in that fighter jet and just no.
Yeah. Did you guys ever see a movie called The Philadelphia Experiment with
yes.
Okay. Remember there was that scene where they
1984 actually.
Yeah, yeah. There was that scene where they tried to commandeer a car from this woman. They jump in and they said the guy looks around, "Where's the clutch?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, okay, that's what." And that was just from 30, 40 years prior.
And that was just a car.
Yeah, that was just a car.
Well, and that's just it. The advancements in aviation just in the time period that he was in, that was the whole point of her taking him to that museum. Was to show
I
him,
would say this little thing from history, like learning to fly a plane in World War One really wasn't that complex. I don't think you had like a couple of hours of training, and then it was like fine. They kind of like missed the landing or didn't practice too much the landing because you were typically going to be dead by the end of it anyway. So anyways, really, really short aviation school. Not like today where you have to be like 3 years in a simulator before you're allowed in a real cockpit anyway.
Did you,
So there's a reason for that.
Another film actually, Spirit of St. Louis, Jimmy Stewart. Most pilots back then really didn't have any formal training. Planes weren't even that sophisticated. It was just all what they call fly by wire. I mean, you have the engine, you have a stick, you have the pedals and the throttle. I mean, granted, I mean there are similar elements, but come on, he's not going to know the first thing about.
No, just the gauges alone. He's probably got like a few gauges to go by. Comparatively, and
but then all the tools and all like everything that indicates like pressure and height and altitude and all azimuth and what have you not, is going to be as clueless as any of us would have been.
And not only that, it's completely differently ran. Like it's all ran by the 80s. They were using computer chips and shit to run everything. Like it was all completely different than anything he'd ever touched before.
Yeah, and I think that in reality it's like a 45-minute hour procedure to like start up a fighter jet. That's why, from what I understand, like real fighter jets that are like on air base and stuff like that, they never ever shut down. Like there is a portion of them are always on, because if you suddenly need them, you don't have an hour to start them up.
Okay, somebody in the chat pointed out fly-by-wire is relatively new. That's okay. Yeah, okay. I have the wrong terminology, but what I mean, everything was just so. There was a glorious lack of sophistication back in the First World War. At the dawn of aviation.
Extremely analog, and then he's jumping into a digital age for sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyway, script, we've pointed out the flaws. As a professional writer, do you agree with the way that they got him into the invisible jet?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of issues with that. I mean, you all made great points, absolutely accurate points. That flying a World War I airplane is far more simpler than flying a 1984 jet, fighter jet. I don't buy he gets in there. I think the whole magic thing of Wonder Woman making a cup turn invisible and then losing it and then being able to miraculously apply the same thing onto her jet was convoluted, came out of nowhere. Everything about that scene just felt weird. The fact that I think part of him taking over an existing body was an afterthought. Part of me suspects that originally he just manifested out of nothing, like was just pulled out of heaven and was Steve Rogers. No, sorry, Steve Trevor.
Okay, as
too many Steves. In World War I Steve, World War Steves.
I'll see your Steve Rogers and raise you as Steve Austin.
There we go. Yeah, it feels like they initially had him like manifest out of nothing and then realized, oh, we can't do that because then there's no conflict with giving him up. So then they said, oh, I saw Source Code recently that had Jake Gyllenhaal. He took over someone else's body. Let's do that. And then they wedged that in there and then completely forgot that it kind of takes apart the whole flaw of him having no ID in order to take public air transit, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah.
And then how the heck does she have authorization to get into this military base? She doesn't work for the military. She works for the Smithsonian.
You're asking too many questions.
I would have thought it would be much easier to find a way to sneak on a commercial plane than to steal a goddamn F-16 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. Regardless if she would have been able to make that motherfucker invisible, I'm not so sure.
She doesn't use it later on in the movie either.
Not just that. I don't even really think that would fucking I don't know. They would have fucking shot him down before. Like the whole stupid scene is stupid.
Not only that, the
It's
radar
stupid.
display was far more advanced than what they had in
Because let's not
1984.
forget, two-thirds of the movie later, she learns how to fly just by listening to him talk. Remember?
Yeah, they did not convey that properly at all.
She learns how to fly faster than Clark did in Man of Steel.
And apparently the lasso of truth is now you can go web slinging with that. I mean that's
well, she hooked a cloud and then hooked lightning, which doesn't make sense.
Deus Machina, whatever she needs it for.
And the entire flying part is basically her going from downtown Washington to, I think, her apartment in that entire sequence. Like, she's up in the air for a long time. It probably would have been faster for her just to take a cab.
no. And she had to feed the cat. Script, come on.
Well,
But
yeah,
she went there to get the armor. Like, that's the thing. She went there to get the armor, but she like hooks herself onto like a chapel and then flies up into the air, then hooks herself onto a jet, and then learns to fly somehow. And then when she lands, it's at her apartment. It's like she's in the same damn city. It shouldn't. That
No,
entire
you're right,
sequence is
Script.
way
You're
too
100%
long.
right. I get what you're saying because, like, think about it, Rob. It's when you go on a flight. Like, part of the flight is the ascension and the descension, right?
Oh yeah,
Like, it takes so much more time for her to go up in the air, do all that. I see what Script's saying. It is fucking ridiculous. Like,
She could have ran.
Well,
like you remember the Family Circle comics? You know, when they would show where the kids would make like this long convoluted trip around just to go 2 feet. That's what she's basically doing here. I get what Script's saying.
Yeah, like it was a completely. It stopped the story to have her to teach her how to fly, so that she can go home, and then she puts on a suit with wings. So that, I guess, defeats the purpose for learning to fly. And then she doesn't fly again afterwards. Like she steals a plane, and she doesn't use that. She uses it once to get to Cairo and then back, and she does it in record time. Which I mean, fighter jets are pretty fast, but I don't know. Like I don't know if they're that fast. Like I couldn't understand the geography of time with regards to where they're going and where they're coming back to.
I can tell you another thing. I very much doubt that a fighter jet has enough fuel to take you from the States to Egypt in one freaking go. I mean, yeah, a commercial airliner can do
like
that.
A Concorde. I thought they were going to bring in the Concorde.
A jet burns a lot of fuel fast, and they don't have nearly the size of a tank.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. That yeah, fly commercial, a commercial plane, yeah, they can make that trip in one go. But a jet, no way in hell. Like yeah, they can go fast, but they can't go that long.
Robert says it's fueled by social justice.
Well, no. Well, no, the objects are big. Brings up a really good point, though. I mean, you can't. I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe if you stretch it, you could probably go pretty far in a fighter jet. But
you can go far, but you can't freaking cross the Atlantic.
No,
yeah, that'd be a pretty.
It'd have to be a very strange
you have aircraft carriers. For fuck's sake. No, like the other thing here though is like. They're bringing up, she did levitate in the last film, but here's the other thing I think we should bring up. This movie is only like half a sequel and half a reboot. That was one thing that really was like weird. Did you guys notice that too? Like half of it kind of matched up with the first film, but then there's a lot of it that was just kind of like, nope, we're doing our own thing now. Kind of like what we were told, or at least I was told, going into this early last year or whatever it was.
What specifically was that?
That was when they were talking about they were totally getting away from Snyderverse. Like everything was going to be soft reboot.
Yeah,
like Shazam had that kind of, and
I know that, but
we're kind of with the same thing here. Just that they weren't going to adhere to the Snyderverse shit. They could go their own way. So like and it does kind of add up to that way because they got enough there to kind of like pull in Steve, but there's things that just don't add up with the first film. You know,
Tom, I finally figured it out. I finally figured out. She figured out how to fly. She listened to Tom Petty. That's all you got to do in these kind of movies. You listen to Tom Petty. Okay, never mind. Okay, that's bad. I thought that was funny. Damn it. Okay,
I got you.
But the whole thing is.
You just muted yourself.
He muted himself.
I'm getting heckled. But anyway. But the whole thing, like you said, you're right. It is a soft reboot. I mean, but at the same time, you got to have some sort of connective tissue to the previous movies.
It does. It has some.
It has Steve's watch.
Yeah, there's a few things, but like the rest of it is stuff like she didn't have all these magical powers. honestly, I don't even really think she was that powerful in the first movie until the end. And then like, yeah, it's like there's things about this movie that are flipping it around. Like, okay, the first movie she was the fish out of water. Okay, in
Yeah.
this movie, Steve's the fish out of water, which I didn't mind that stuff just because their chemistry is good, and I thought I got a few chuckles out of it. But Andre, you didn't like Chris Pine in this one.
No, I don't think he was. I don't blame him for it. He didn't do anything wrong. It's not that he was like miscast or he acted wrong. It's just like I didn't buy the character. I didn't buy the premise of it in any way, shape, or form
Well, that I have an
whatsoever.
issue with. Yeah,
The movie was just and script. Here, I'd also like you to chime in. To me, as a viewer, that was actually inclined to like I wanted to go in and like it, but there were way too many asks. The movie asked me to suspend my disbelief too much on too many occasions, and I couldn't do it. Like, why would these writers and these producers think that they could get away with this script?
Arrogance, I think, is one of the things that I have a pretty strong portion of arrogance in myself as well, but I try my best to sort of mitigate that. But yeah, I think it comes down to arrogance and just the pressure that's coming from the studios, where they give a note and they say just get it done, and then you gotta do it, because that's part of the deal and contract you have. But usually the better writers are creative enough to reconcile what the studio wants and how to make it work in the film. I would say the entire mall thing is really perplexing. The decisions, the choices. I mean, if you ask me to say yes, we'll have an antique shop in the mall that also is a front for a business, I'm like, okay, I'll allow for that. Like
Yeah, I'll allow for that
that's
too.
fine. But as soon as you get the guys that are robbing it to one just decides to hide behind a kid, and then the other robbers are like saying, put the kid down, like don't hurt the kid and stuff, and instead of just trying to make a break for it. That doesn't make any sense here. Destroying CCTV cameras to try and hide your identity is not how CCTV cameras work. Like yeah. How is she there?
On that
Like,
level of like, why should she give a shit about a digital photo of herself in BBS? If it's digital, the chances are it's not the only copy.
exactly. And then, like, I don't understand how she's there, because she doesn't have super hearing like Superman does, where you can kind of like hear the panic. And then they try to set up like in her little apartment, she has like her own little observation.
They do that later too when she's flying. They have the Christopher Reeve scene.
Yeah, they copy a little bit of that blatantly.
Where you can hear all these voices and shit. It's like, well, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
That beginning, the opening. I hate harping on the opening sequence, but it's a lot of contrivances. She's just going around the city, running around, doing good deeds. I mean, really,
nobody noticed her for 70 years, Rob.
Nobody noticed her in her flashy outfit for 70 years. I will say this though, one thing that they kind of did the best, but they're each done in isolation, is when she rescues the kids. Each one is kind of okay. When she swings that little girl into the teddy bear, I thought that was kind of cute. How they got there, that was hard.
I also thought it tonally was way off.
Yeah, because
the tone was all over the place.
Yeah, with something like, you know what it reminded me of? Like those movies which are made for children and are like really overexposed and really overly comedic, kind of like the Inspector Gadget movie, little bit like the Pee Wee Herman movie.
I know what you're getting at, Rob.
Everything is like hyper real.
This movie was shot like a comedy.
To a point, yeah. I mean, because you could cut all those scenes where she's saving kids individually out.
It's very flat. It's very colorful. It's very bright.
Yep, you throw them into a music video and get a great reaction out of it. But to weave them into this type of film, it just doesn't feel honest to the story that they're trying to tell, honest to the tone.
If they had opened with the heist, with those guys robbing the antique place, and then they showed like Diana, Wonder Woman, whatever you want to call her.
She was on a date shopping with her boyfriend in the mall, which makes sense. And then all of a sudden she sees these guys that are kind of setting up a sting like she would have experience to recognize, because who just hangs out at a phone and doesn't put money into the phone, right?
Yeah,
And then like
exactly.
another guy hanging out there, and she could like notice that, and then wander in for like out of curiosity, see that they steal something, spin around, transform into your costume, and then take them out. That would have been a fun action set piece.
Yeah, she has a reason to be at the mall. They have a reason to be at the mall. They have both and their paths cross. It's believable, that she would be there at the same time if she was on a date, she was clothes shopping or whatever, and she sees people running outside, and then she takes a look. What's going on? Oh my God! Yeah, and then she springs into action.
Exactly. You can parallel it with Clark Kent on his first day second day at the Daily Planet. He's walking outside, and a hat falls in front of him. He looks up and he's like, "What's going on?" And all this crowd's around him, looking up, and sees a helicopter tipping on the top of the roof of the Daily Planet. And then that's when he jumps into action. I mean, it's completely believable in that scenario for him to pick up on what's going on, because he's is up in his own head just finishing work. But they don't give us the same context. Instead, these two things happen in isolation, and then Wonder Woman just shows up out of the blue.
Exactly. It's complicated. You got 17 things to get to one point. All you had to do is put it in. First of all, have people pulling a heist at her museum, and they want that item that they're looking for the item that Max Lord wants, right? That's what you have it be about.
Oh, and that's even more convoluted. So Max Lord arranges to buy this thing in the black market, and then 4 unrelated criminals go in there and steal it.
Yeah, that's the other thing you have going on here too. It's like, yeah, you got to streamline this fucker. It is so all over the damn place. Like, that's the thing is, okay, really, in the end, you take out the magic bullshit. You take out like her part of it and bringing Steve back and some other things like that and all that kind of stuff. You could put this movie together in a decent way, but it still isn't going to make it a good movie is what I'm trying to get to. Like, you can streamline it, you can try and fix it, you can script doctor it all day long. Because like I was going to say, the ending is easy fix, but it's still not going to fix the movie. Like, the ending is so convoluted when you get to it. All it had to be was his kid going up to him and go, "Dad, I just wish everything was back to the way it was. You just didn't have him use his wish earlier." And then his kid's the one who saves him, is all it is.
Couldn't do that. Yeah, totally, yeah.
That was an easy ending, easy fix.
Well, here's the other part too.
Everything.
What does Maxwell Lord want? Because I don't understand what he wants.
Exactly. Well, that's what I think is his point is, first he wants to be, and that's where I think we're missing shit that's on the cutting room floor, and how that ending would have fixed their arc anyway, even though it wouldn't have fixed the movie, is in the beginning, he's just sick of being seen as a loser by his son, and he wants to be seen as a success. So he gets to that point, but the more power he gets, the more greedy he gets, right? That's the whole thing, is he loses sight of that whole thing. And that's kind of the whole point of his son being just left alone at the office, is he's losing sight of his son. Like, Patty's trying to be a real fucking cool director here with all kinds of like levels. It ain't working. It is not working. At least not on this, like, whatever she's trying to do with this fucking story, she lost it somewhere in the editing. Cause like, the whole setup with the father and son is kind of lost throughout the film. That's just like I said with Cheetah. Her whole setup is fucking, it starts out, then she's like dumped for half the fucking movie. And then all of a sudden, just because her and Max Lord had one scene together earlier, she's out there putting her life on the line for him. And she's just automatically pissed off at Wonder Woman because the story says she has to be.
And she's been helping Wonder Woman this entire time,
Exactly.
researching the origin of the stone, all this. It's all convoluted.
That's what I'm saying. It's like there's a big portion of this movie missing, but then there's a lot of this movie that's left here that shouldn't be there. And that's what I was joking about the other night with the guys on Friday Night Tights. And that was what I was saying, is like, there's a half hour of stuff in this movie that we needed for fucking context that's gone, but yet there's this shit ton of crap like Rob was talking about, like the fucking scene with the jet that just, we've already talked about how that doesn't even make sense to begin with. And that's just about every scene and every setup in this fucking movie is just so convoluted that you can't even, you try to sit down and fix it. You're sitting here for 12 years trying to fix it. And like Andre said at the beginning, the best way to fix this is chuck the fucker out the window and start from scratch.
Pretty much. It's like, Maxwell Lord's entire story should have been him trying to win custody over his son.
Exactly.
And that's what led him to, making these deals, making the money so he can pay for the lawyer fees and all that other stuff. And then they throw in this one scene where it's his weekend. He's like, how many weekends do I get with this kid? It's completely counter to everything that was set up before. it's like this comes out of nowhere because it should be like, oh, your girlfriend or your wife, your ex-wife did not drop off your kid today, and you should be like, well, it's my weekend, I want to be with them, and that should be his driving force, because then he becomes a more sympathetic villain where his love for his kid is clouding his judgment and ethics over his business practices and what he wants. But they don't do that. Instead, they just go the cliche easy route where, oh yeah, he pretends to love his kid, but does he really love his kid? We can't tell. And then at the very end, you get this stupid flashback of his horrible childhood, and that's why he wants to be a good dad, and it just doesn't hit
Exactly.
because it's nothing. It comes way too late. It's
That's
lazy.
what I mean. You have no context, and then you have a bunch of payoffs at the end with no setup. Like, it's at least not enough setup or context. Yeah. Or it comes too late.
You know, a lot of people are talking about Maxwell Lord. He's I'm gonna have to bring it up. He's a Trump allegory. Oh, he's and first thing I said is like, no. I was watching this, I'm like, no, he's not a Trump allegory. There was a guy back in the late 80s, early 90s. He did a bunch of infomercials for real estate investment named Tom Vu. He was exposed as a total fraud. He got sued by a bunch of people. He ran the same kind of get-rich-quick scheme that Max Lord was trying to run, and his justification for it, he goes, "Oh, people say to you it's a get-rich-quick scheme. Of course it's get-rich-quick scheme, because life is too short to get rich slow." I mean, he came across as that kind of, I'm like, yeah, you buy into it. You want to buy into it because it's a great image, but at the same time, it's like it's a sham. And it just seemed they tried so hard to make him like so 80s, like the 80s guy from Futurama.
Yeah. Bonitis.
Yeah, Bonitis, yeah. And I'm like, after a while, it's like, oh, come on. I was there in the 80s. I don't believe this. I'm like, you guys don't know what
That's
you're
the
talking
problem.
about.
That's my
Yeah.
problem with the whole movie is I just don't believe this. I mean, and you can get me to believe some, pretty wacky shit especially with superhero movies, right? I mean, I believe a kid that can climb walls, right? And a man can fly and comes from another planet. You don't have to do a lot to get me in, but just like, to quote our good friend Robert Meyer Burnett, verisimilitude, and that was something that, Richard Donner kept saying throughout making Superman and what he did for Superman 2 was verisimilitude. He even had it plastered on a plaque over his office with Superman. For that very reason is that you have to make the audience believe. You cannot treat the audience stupid or expect them to go on this ride with you if you're going to keep throwing this shit out there that just is when you're constantly questioning and asking why or what the hell is going on here. And it's not saying that the movie's hard to follow. It's just stupid. It's just fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's stupid as a result of it being lazy. They had no premise. I mean, we get a scene where Diana goes out to dinner alone, and I'm wondering why. Why do that? Why is she doing this? Why is she going out alone? What does it serve? Does she just? We didn't get a scene of her opening her fridge and it being empty, and so she has to like either get takeout or go out. We get nothing to understand there. And then she hails a cab, and then some other guy accidentally takes it but apologizes, and then like, what is that scene? That serves no purpose. It doesn't really give us anything. And also, how is it beneficial to Diana to still be hung up on the first guy she slept with 60 years ago? Like, that's the context right there. Like, she's still hung up on the first guy she banged, and she hasn't moved on, and she's living another world, and yeah, she doesn't come across as inspirational or interesting. She should be dating, or maybe she's engaged to someone, and she should have a life. And then if you bring Trevor in, then you have a conflict because you're like, oh, this is the first man I fell in love with versus the guy I'm with now.
They should show her try video dating. That was a big thing in the 80s.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You know what she should be? She should be like a grandmother by that point already. She should have like gotten over Trevor in like the first 5 years and been on like her third or fourth, fifth husband and had kids with every last one of them and now had multiple generations of kids. I would have
a little like Elizabeth Taylor joke.
I would have almost them rather in this movie. Maybe
yeah, but I mean, I don't mean like having a husband for like a couple of years and stuff. Like been with each one for like 20 years until like he died or something, and then moved on and repeat the process.
Kind of like Highlander.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like Highlander. Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
No, I think that they should have done for Steve's character is actually not had him be Steve. They could have brought Chris Pine back, but what you have done is just change his hair a little bit, change him up a little bit, have him be somebody who's now, and that's what catches her eye is that she looks that he looks so much like Steve, but you have him be a completely new character who doesn't act like Steve, who's a bit different than Steve. So it's like kind of her idea of like, okay, is it that I'm still in love with Steve, or is it you can have that kind of a struggle. Yeah, or am I in love with his face, or is it this? Yeah, that would have made more sense because that's the stupid part that gets us down to the end of the convolution of, all she has to do all this time is renounce her fucking wish to get her powers back.
And she doesn't have to touch the stone to do it, because wouldn't that be a rule?
I have no idea, but the whole fucking renouncing the wish thing is the most convoluted
It's the easy
bullshit
out,
ever.
man. It's just the easy out. Yep.
It's
I will
almost
say
ahead.
one thing about that also though, which I thought was like really really lame. Okay, yeah, so you got the love of your life back, and for that you had to renounce a little bit of your powers. You're still super powered compared to everyone else. It's just that being hit point blank by a bullet is now going to give you a little cut. That was the sacrifice. From my point of view, that's
she
not
was
a big
supposedly
sacrifice at
getting
all.
weaker and weaker, but
They did not convey that properly. The biggest hint they did was her breaking the lock, but they didn't go any further beyond that. Like, she still flipped a truck.
yeah,
not
they
you
did
said,
a
yeah.
poor job of doing it.
She was able to alter the course of a armored personnel carrier. For
couldn't bring off a lock on a basically a garage door.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah,
and like Over Easy says it was Steve's grandson in the TV show. Now that would be a little too much like Captain America a little bit, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with that. I would rather have seen something like that to give us an excuse to bring back Chris Pine than the convoluted bullshit we got. And I guess that's a good place to bring up the thing that everybody wants to talk about. And that is basically that the body that Steve was using was dolphin loved by Wonder Woman, because this man was unaware that his body was being used and he was not able to give permission.
It's a little bit more complicated because of that, because it's two people, two souls in a consensual relationship, but one body that's being used as a puppet. Like, that's the thing. It's like it's very weird.
I think that the people that are behind this, and from their point of view, when it's the other way around, it's empowering. No, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying I agree with it.
Wasn't
but
that the
like,
excuse they used for that Overboard remake?
that I don't know about any Overboard thing, but basically,
Okay, you ever
like
seen Overboard with Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell?
No, not for
Yeah,
a
I
long
think so.
time.
Okay, they remade it like 3 years ago. I can't remember who was in it, but they
Anna
swapped the
Faris.
roles.
Yeah, I think
Anna
so.
Faris, and yeah. So they made it to where the guy was the one
That
who
got
had
amnesia.
amnesia.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be okay because the other one was problematic now.
Yeah. Yeah, that we see that, like, that's my point exactly. That that it's like really, really double standards. That if it had been a woman's body, it would have been really problematic. But the same people that would say that if it's a man that's like on the used end, then that's empowering.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, like that was the excuse. Like, because for years it was like, oh, Overboard's a problematic movie because of the woman being used, blah 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 blah. But then it was okay when they made the remake with the other way around.
But the other part, the joke in the Kurt Russell film is that he would just make fun of the fact that they were sleeping together, but they hadn't slept together yet. And it wasn't until he tells her that story that makes her fall in love with him, and then she chooses to go onto that part too. It's still not ideal, but it's not a manipulation, because at that point in the original movie they had already kind of fallen in love with each other, even though the entire marriage that he made up was fiction. In this scenario, it's overcomplicated because it's a soul possession, so to speak. And yeah, like Chris Pine's character has, through the acts of Wonder Woman, has stolen someone else's life, and it's now his for the foreseeable future at this point. And you're kind of wondering, like, Why did they do it this way? What sort of advantage or complications do they have? Because it'd be far more interesting and complicated if you have this character that just appears out of nowhere with no history other than what happened 100 years ago. He has no money. He has maybe just some general clothes just for not avoiding indecency issues, and he just is completely out of time, as opposed to him being a soul that rewrites over someone else's identity. I think that's what they originally went for, and they just went back and said, "Oh, he has to have like a job and a career and and a place for them to go, because how else is he going to find Diana?" And yeah, I just see them coming up with newer ideas as they, instead of like leaning into the original one that could have worked better.
Yeah. No, I know we're getting way behind on some super chats here, Andre.
Yeah, we do, absolutely.
Sorry about
so yeah, we'll get into some of the super chats. Just give me a second to refresh here, and we shall get right into it. All right, let's see them.
Yeah, while you're
Now,
doing that, oh, never mind.
yeah, no, I got them. The first one that we haven't addressed yet is Mihon, that sends 100 Swedish krona. Thank you so much. Whoa, you're up late. Saw the movie and was just waiting for it to end. Pine was fun. Pascal was dull. Wig was typical nerd girl wanna fit in story. Gadot was some reason a worse actress than in the 2017 version, and he gives it a 3 out of 10. Yeah, can't disagree with any of that.
I gotta ask Scripto of something. What is it about the whole stereotype or the whole trope of the nerdy, greasy-haired person that suddenly gets empowered? I mean, why do so many films keep coming back to that?
You're talking about the Hans Christian Andersen, the Ugly Duckling story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, you saw it in Iron Man, you saw it in Batman, Batman and Robin, you saw it
Batman Returns and Batman Forever.
Yeah, and you saw it in
and actually in Batman 3 and Robin.
Yeah,
and it was in the Amazing Spider-Man, Jamie Foxx. I mean, they always go down that road. It's just too easy.
Well, that's usually because it's like the safer thing to say, oh, he's a geek, so how do we make him the super biggest geek that they are so that we can make that change look more dramatic, as opposed to, because they don't even do the same thing in The Amazing Spider-Man with Peter Parker. He's supposed to be a nerd, but he's nowhere near like nerdy. He's got this cool haircut. He's got a skateboard. He's kind of like this too cool for school guy, and then he gets spider powers, and his transformation is negligible. Like with Tobey Maguire, we meet him running after a bus because the bus driver thinks he's a dork and doesn't want to pick him up. Like the changes are
well for the hero. For the hero, I understand it, but they keep going back to this for the villain as well,
because it's easy to as a nice mirror.
It's easy, but on top of that, like for instance, for Spider-Man, you're having two people come from the same place, yet one makes a decision that's altruistic and the other one makes a decision that's self-serving. That's simple on its own hand, but they don't handle it the best of ways,
right?
Really,
and they handled it poorly in this movie. Even if we could have done it by the numbers, they still did it poorly.
See, that's what I think the brilliance of the first Iron Man movie was, that you have Obadiah Stane, a guy who already has power. He already has power and prestige, but it's still not more. He just wants more. Yeah, I mean, like we don't see that. Yeah, we see that, but we don't see that as much anymore.
Well, yeah, because he's a guy that likes to look out for Robert Downey Jr.'s character. He's a surrogate son who he doesn't. I mean, he loves, but he's an arrogant and he's a troublemaker. But he makes weapons, so he makes me rich. So I'll keep him around. Yeah. And then when he stopped producing anything that was useful, he's like, well, I don't need him anymore, so I'll arrange to kill him, and then take over the company myself. And when Robert Downey Jr. Creates the Iron Man suit to get away, creating a whole new form of weaponized technology, he's like, okay, now I got one more thing I can get out of this guy, and then really take over, the entire war profiteering market.
But there's also the aspect of it, not to belabor this point, but anything's right now is more interesting to talk about Wonder Woman. You have this aspect too of, you were like a son to me, and you took that and you almost like the Godfather, you disrespected me. How dare you spit on my tutelage and my love and I wanted to be revered by you. That kind of aspect too.
Well, here's my problem with the Kristen Wiig thing, though, and I'm not picking on her looks. Okay, I'm not going to go down that route again. because Lord knows I have no reason to, but that's not even why I was bringing it up. It's just that you can't believe her transformation. That's the thing. She has like 3 character turns in this movie that make absolutely no sense or come out of nowhere. And it's like she goes from being, the supposed mousy nerd who's obsessed with, Wonder Woman and wants to be Diana. Okay. And then when she gets that, okay, fine. She ends up with Max Lord in one scene, gives him the stone, and then gets yelled at by Wonder Woman. So that's supposed to be the reason why she doesn't like Wonder Woman anymore, is just because she yelled at her for doing something she shouldn't have done in the first place. And she knew damn well she shouldn't have done it in the first place because she sat there and said it before Max put his dick in her. I mean, come on. It's like, give me a fucking break here. And then she makes that second turn with him jump, like I said. And then she's like, oh, I don't want to be this anymore. I want to be the apex predator, blah, blah, blah. It just, her whole character was just fucking stupid.
They're missing a big point, because she sees the value of how her life has changed, but if we gave her a scene where even like that drunk guy hit on her and she couldn't defend herself and she wanted to be more powerful, then you could understand her change, because she's like, even with the confidence I have of Diana and the people looking at me and liking me more and not me able to be more communicative with everybody else, I'm still weak. And if she wanted that more power, which would mean her getting a second wish, which also contradicts the rules of the first
thing. And I know
and then she turned into this beast, that would make a bit more sense. But because she's like, I've got the attention, but I don't have the strength. And she wants the strength because she's tired of still being weak and needing someone else to help her, even though she's got this attention. It's like she hasn't got the full package. I can understand that greed. And if Diana's threatening to take that away via Maxwell Lord, I could see her doing that. But I mean, and that's kind of what they're trying to do, but they did not establish that at all. It just was really an about face.
When I want to say this, because like Baron Noel, yeah, you're right. The turn of the twist or whatever was that she didn't want to give up her wish, but she goes and turns around and gives it up in the next scene anyway.
So at the very end, she gives it up after saying she never would.
Like, yeah, it's just like, and here's the thing: nothing that Wonder Woman does to her really justifies her turning on her the way she does. Like, that's what I don't understand about the whole fucking thing. At no point, if anything, it should be like Max is holding something over her or something like that to make her, turn against her will, because otherwise I have no reason to believe that her character should have turned. Like, there's nothing really here that makes me, because like, okay, fine, if you'd have had it to where like, because that's the other thing, she wants to be like Diana, but then as soon as she starts getting attention, she's just like Diana and she starts turning off every guy around her.
Could be.
Then the next scene, she's sitting there soaking it all up. And then the next scene, she kills some guy practically for fucking trying to,
assault
hit on her again. It's like she goes back and forth. There's no, at no point is her character ever consistent.
No, and you know what? You could make a turn if she, that homeless guy, that save the cat moment she has at the beginning with the homeless guy where she hands him food and she apparently knows him. If she was in a position where she wanted to help him but couldn't because she's not strong enough, and then she just decides to hate all the types of people that treated her badly, that also treated this homeless guy that she befriended terribly, you could do something with that. But they don't. In fact, they just completely brush him off. He gets 2 scenes, and we're supposed to understand that she's sympathetic to all this, and that it's just a very poorly mishandled way for her character. Like, because their setup is kind of okay. Mousy, Weasley, whatever, we've seen that before. And then the journey to the confidence and then to the evil doesn't line up at all. It just doesn't. Because she's helping Wonder Woman all the way to the very end, until they're reading the book from the Mayan culture and saying, oh yeah, it's a god, it's an evil god. I'm not going to give you the name exactly, which is stupid because she recognizes the language on the inside of the ring, but she doesn't know who
meant
wrote
to
it.
show
like,
that that only suggested that we didn't actually bother to do any research from actual mythology into any kind of god that could actually do this. So just go with us. It's an evil god, and don't ask questions. Just like, don't ask, just consume.
Exactly. Like, they call it, if they were using the Norse gods, they could get away with Loki on that.
Yeah.
But
and Clyde, the first scene, he was just trying to pick her up at first, and then he got a little rough with her. And then
the homeless guy was the black guy on the bench.
No, the homeless guy, no, he never did. No, he was nice to her, and
he was nice and fine. It's the drunk guy in the
yeah. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. And then the homeless guy is the one who sees. Yeah, he almost sees her practically kill the one guy, and then like he just disappears. Like his character goes nowhere. Like they don't even like I'm figuring the setup is that he's going to turn around and tell on her or whatever, but they don't even go anywhere with any of it. And again, that goes back to what you were saying, Andre, and to kind of jump off of Kristen Wiig on back onto like Max Lord and super chats and stuff was like, what did she give up really? Because I like that one point they just made in the chat was like, okay, Wonder Woman tries to make it so, oh, you gave up your innocence and all this bullshit. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't show anything. No, what they should have done is like
she was better off without it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I think that would have been a better point. Like I just had on screen here was, you know, if she started losing her intelligence and started becoming more animalistic, that would have made more sense because like that was her, you know, her strength was that she was, you know, supposed to be this nerdy scientist chick. Well, what would be the biggest thing that she could lose? Well, that would be her intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they totally didn't think this movie through at all. Even as bad as it is, it's like you could still have. I don't even know if you could have really fixed it, but I don't know.
No,
Anyway.
you couldn't. But we have some more super chats to get through, because that's how we walk down this particular rabbit hole. But we're about to get out of it and continue with some super chats. Roger Haynes says for 10 Canadian dollars, thank you so much. I watched Wonder Woman 84 with my dad. He said it reminded him of the monkey's paw. As for me, well, as Indy said to the man in the red vest in The Fate of Atlantis, it's better than a sharp stick in the eye. Ah, there you go. And then we got two super stickers from West Moody Webcast, who sent us a poop super sticker, and Larry, who sent us a smile super sticker, so thank you so much. And the Physicality channel says it was better than the first, which ended with the PS3 boss level. But then again, I don't judge superhero films by science fiction / canon standards. Graph Tanker 98 says they ripped off the theme from that movie Sunshine. They ripped off other themes. Guys, I'm positive that they ripped off the music from Batman v Superman. And then I don't mean the Wonder Woman theme. I mean the theme that is in the very, very beginning of Batman v Superman, when we see Martha Wayne being shot and little Bruce Wayne falling down in that vat of bats and everything like that. Like that sad orchestral theme with like the woman's vocal in the backgrounds, and we have the same theme repeated in the Martha moment. I am positive that is very much about the same theme that is being used when we get like this thing between Maxwell Lord and his son towards the end there, when he rescinds his wish. I think it's the same theme going on there, but let me know in the comments if I'm way off or not. But anyway, moving on with the super chats. The Wall says that was supposed to be a cat costume. It looked like a monkey to me. Well, I moved like one too. And C Kateni 28 says, funny story. Went to see this in Cinemark XD IMAX for $40 with the family. Got
Ouch.
6 free tickets back after there was a sound issue. Worth it. Yeah, that was a good deal. And the Walls also says she turned into a spotted howler monkey. Yeah. And Larry Bernard says, also, Diana has top-tier access to the Smithsonian. Hey, I'm testing this jet out with my pilot friend. It's a lot of hot nonsense. Yeah, that it certainly is. And the Wall said again, for $20. Thank you so much. This was something that we addressed live when it was like really current. Fly-by-wire is fly-by-electronics. Before that, you had fly-by-feel. The pilot had to feel the craft he was flying. It's actually a lot harder to fly by feel than wire. Most modern pilots could not fly a World War II plane. Oh, I don't believe it. Yeah,
I kind of doubt that. I mean, because everybody trains initially on a prop plane. I mean,
I can believe that. If you take someone that right now is learning to drive, and they say that they learn to drive in a fully automated Tesla, and then you tell them to drive a Volkswagen from the year 2000 with manual drive, or with like stick. That's not going to go down so well.
Yeah, well, there's the thing you can. Well, not this. Well, only about 10% of cars shipped to the U.S. are manual. Nobody wants to drive a manual anymore.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if
Yeah.
people in the U.S., like for instance, here most people drive manual, and if people then who have spent a whole lifetime in the U.S. driving automatic, and suddenly they rent a car in Europe and they're given a car with stick, how well is that going to go when they suddenly have to clutch and gear and everything? I can absolutely believe that a modern day pilot would seriously struggle with a World War II plane unless they had specifically trained for it.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I would have to think, like I said, that it would have been years, but you could probably a modern pilot probably could fly a prop plane. I'm not necessarily not World War II. A guy who used to he used to work for the company I used to work for. Hank, great guy. He actually used to be a pilot, and the owner of the company used to be a pilot. And he said you actually need a special license to fly a World War II plane.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah, because it's like a sports car. Really, it may be a very old sports car, but it's still a sports car.
But I would be surprised on the military side of things if you weren't trained on some of the basic of aeronautics to fly versatile vehicles in the state of emergency, and then you'd go into a more proficient line for a specific type of fighter jet or a convoy or anything of that nature. Because it just seems like to your advantage, like, oh, say something happens and all we have are these older units that are like 20 years old. The pilot should know how to use them in a state of emergency as opposed to more modern vehicles. I would expect that from a military side of things, but like for a public access, if you want to go to like normal pilot lessons publicly, I don't think you'd ever learn how to fly a World War II plane. If anything, it'd just be like a single engine, and then you'd go from there.
Yeah, I mean the World War II planes are flown by enthusiasts. I mean,
like the biplanes,
yeah, and even the biplanes and stuff like that. But the laws of aerodynamics are the same all over. I mean, so there's a bit, the basic knowledge is there, and like I said, since most pilots do learn on like a Cessna, I would imagine going from oh geez, I haven't done this in years. Hold on, it's coming back to me. Just like I haven't driven a manual in years, but it would take me a few minutes for it to come back. But I probably still could do it.
Well, getting the timing from the brake and the clutch to the gear changes. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But so moving on from that, there's the movie. Just to summarize, there were a lot of asks from the movie in every little thing. And the Fessman 93 said it felt like a Schumacher Batman film. Certainly felt like it came from that era. The script did, not special effects.
Kiva Goldsman-ish,
yeah. I really like the script felt like something that could have been written in 1997.
It really did, and like Tom, you're very much correct. It does. It feels like an 80s take on an 80s movie of what the 80s should be from someone who never lived in the 80s.
Yeah. Larry Bernard says it's all about the power of positive thinking, which was a massive influence on Trump. He went to the church of said pastor.
There are a few things you could equate to Trump in this, and I've even said that maybe there was stuff that was probably more on the nose that was left on the cutting room floor. But at the same time, I see both sides of where people can see it if you want to project it into it a little bit, but at the same time, it's not nearly as bad as we were expecting.
It's more Michael Milken, the junk bonds guy. Greed is good. Greed is good. Greed works. That kind of stuff.
I agree with Rob on that. I think that what they said about Trump, that's like mostly virtue signaling. That's like virtue signaling. Like,
that's
look, here we have
here
we have a guy who who tries to fool the masses by saying he can fulfill wishes, and we're gonna call that out, and look how virtuous we are. I think that's what
I
this
mean, if
is
you
all
want to
about.
compare him to modern day Trump, maybe to a point, because they like at one point I think they even refer to him as a washed up what
Yeah,
is it?
they
Like
did.
Well, they call him he's a television
television,
personality. That's what he is.
yeah, like television personality with some other thing, wannabe billionaire or millionaire, whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
something
was
like
that one
that.
crack against him that I think was really just to be kind of a jab.
Yeah. But
But
in
again,
reality, it's broke and everything like that. It's like, yeah, to me, those were like, haha, look at us. Look, we got this dig in. It looked like that to me.
that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, you could pick it out a little bit, but it's not nearly as bad as some of the other movies we've dealt with.
No, honestly, like it says to me, it says more about the people making the movie and their
Yeah,
worldview
that's what I was
than
getting at.
anything
Yeah.
else. Yeah. So if anything, it looks bad on them. I don't think that anyone is going to look at it and say,
Well, and
ha
then
ha ha ha, they got
Well,
look
and
at
it,
what
and
they
it kind
did.
of goes against their whole point by the time, because they make him a sympathetic character by the end. I know somebody else brought that up too. So I think that's what they were pissed about it for. Because they're
Yeah.
like, how could you make this Trump character and then make him sympathetic by the end? Or
Well,
something?
the other
Yeah.
part with the ending, and I guess we'll talk about it later, is there's no consequences.
No, this whole movie's stupid. I think I just said it to Steve online. Like, this whole movie's a clusterfuck of stupid. That's my word for this movie.
Yeah. I think, and the same people that were angry about that were angry that there was no romance between Wonder Woman and Kristen Wiig's
There's actually a
character.
super
That's
chat
what
about
they
that up
wanted.
the way.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah, when we get to that, because there is
Yeah.
that one scene, the dinner scene did get kind of lesy, but outside of that, no.
That dinner scene is horrible because each character is talking about themselves, and it's not really a conversation.
Yeah, it's dumb.
It's really bad.
It was all bad across the board. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Aswani316 says, Gal Gadot is beautiful but not a good actress. And The Wall says, for another $10, thank you so much, people in Hollywood are suffering from Homer Simpson / Burns syndrome. Males in the movie has to be an idiot like Homer or the villain like Burns, regardless of position they hold in the movie. Yeah, this is a good point. Good point, actually. One of the things that I liked with the first movie was that it wasn't woke. It didn't need to trash anyone to basically up Wonder Woman, whereas this one had like this thing that every man on screen is an asshole.
Yeah, pretty much.
I kept thinking too of somebody else. What did it is? This is the Treehouse of Horrors. This is the monkey's paw.
Monkey paw. Yeah, well, she even says it in the fucking movie like twice. I think they bring it up.
Well, the monkey's paw is from like 1902, so it's a story.
No, I know, but they actually even bring it up in the story, like in the movie. Like they say the monkey. It's like a monkey's paw. I think she says at one point.
I kept expecting the guy in the marketplace to appear. So I must warn you, each wish comes with grave consequences. I was once president of Algeria,
and the free Wagway.
Yeah, pretty much. And moving on from that, to get caught up here, Sergeant Politeness sent us a super sticker with a little unicorn, so thanks so much for that. M Tax Shark says, just 2 hours of Wonder Woman TV's 70s TV series. I'm good. And Stubble McShave says, for 20 Swedish krona, apparently no contradicting or end of world wish, apparently no contradicting or end of world wishes. No, apparently.
Well, that's the paradox in the film itself. Is like, you get to a point where wishes start compiling on each other, and like a large majority of people are going to wish to be like the president of the world or the king of the world or the leader of the world and all this kind of crap. So like, how are you even going to grant all those wishes? And then again, like I said, everything falls into utter fucking chaos right after everybody starts getting their wishes. So just like, it's kind of a metaphor for the entire film.
Speaking of metaphor for the entire film and wishes, now we got to Phil Moore's super chats saying, "Are there any low-key lesbian-esque scenes between Wonder Woman and Cheetah?" I know that
Mainly just
many
that
probably
bitter cold.
wished for that, but
There's a cat
yeah,
fight.
If you can call it that.
But yeah, any lesbian scenes in this movie would not have saved it. Trust me. And I've seen plenty of movies to prove it.
Rob would know. He's
yeah.
a specialist.
Yes, I know what I'm talking about here,
Yeah,
people.
we will defer to Rob's expertise on this one. So yeah, and Eva Jantz says, ever since the first film, the Wonder Woman theme sounded like an electric guitar, slightly reworked version of the Cena theme. And Christopher Malloy says Grace Randolph equals shill. And with that, we're all caught up on super chats.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I just heard something else. It would appear that I got like a message from a trusted friend here, who says that Rotten Tomatoes has apparently been very busy protecting this movie from bad reviews.
Well, it did take a huge dump because I was on with Yellow Flash last night, and he noticed that it went from 70 down to like 63, I think it was last night on the critics side. But
it's gonna go down much further
but the
than
person,
that.
but the what's the what do you call it?
Audience?
The audience score hadn't really budged. So I don't know. He liked the movie all right though. I mean, he agreed with some of my criticisms, but I mean, again, Super Blubberpuss, I love that name, says Weeg always has raccoon eyes. She was totally miscast here. I don't care. Even if you get what's her face who plays Black Widow or something like that. Yeah, anybody who is at least can play both sides of the role. Like that's what the problem I had with her. She can't play both sides of the role here. That's my problem. I can't. No, it didn't work for me. I mean, not just on the story level, but just as the character, I just can't buy her in that kind of a role.
Yeah, I couldn't buy the movie.
Well, that's my big problem, but
yeah.
Don't get him started, Mihan. Please.
Yeah, Rob, you want to take that one?
Hold on. Just okay, there you go. That's my kazoo fulfillment for the.
You could do the Wonder Woman theme real quick.
So I'm impressed.
Wonder Woman. There you go.
I'm impressed that he's still up because it's in Sweden and it's 2:30 there, just like it's here. So yeah.
Yeah, we know you're getting pretty tired, but I'm surprised we still got over 1,500 people watching. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We appreciate that so very much. If you could hit that like button, that would also help us out greatly. Thank you so much for being here, guys. We appreciate it.
Indeed. And John Hill says, sorry, I did not enjoy Wonder Woman.
Don't owe anybody an apology.
Yeah, exactly. Never apologize. Like you can apologize if you accidentally step on someone's foot, literally. But never apologize for not liking a corporate product like this. Especially not one where the star and director got paid massive bonuses that no one in the industry is going to get.
Speaking of that, Andre, I think you're right. I think that's a good point to be made is basically Warner Brothers, AT&T, what have you, did Patty Jenkins and them the biggest favor they could have ever done in the world.
Yeah. And I will reiterate my point that they did it only because this was a movie that was directed by a high-profile woman starring another high-profile woman. And they don't want any of them coming out and saying that they did us dirty or anything like that. So they paid them an amount that they probably knew that the movie was never going to get. They knew that this was just going to add to the movie's losses, but they bought silence from criticism because the only ones that's going to be screwed over now are the toxic white males, which are all the other directors, more or less. And like, who cares about that as long as these ones are happy and don't create a stink in the media.
And Fezman sends in a £5 super chat, says, "Oh my God, they killed Steve, you bastards." Again.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
again,
and they
and
really didn't understand the dynamic between the wish and the lies and the truth that they were trying to do. That was very childish.
it was really
Yeah.
frustrating.
Someone on the Facebook group said it's a good thing Patty Jenkins locked down that Rogue Squadron movie. Ooh boy.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if it happens, because I think that depends entirely on which faction of Lucasfilm are the ones ultimately behind it, and how does that fit into the bigger scheme of things. But like the only projects that I will say that I am 100% certain are going to go forward is everything related to the Mandalorian and everything that is. Oh yeah, not everything, but the Obi-Wan series, because that's just too far ahead and too close to shooting that they can do anything with it. But everything else, I don't know. I mean, look at how many different Star Wars movies that have been announced over the past 3 years, and look at how many of those movies that were previously announced are now happening. Not a single bloody one of them. This is the only one. So we'll see if even that happens. But what is happening next, as Christian Garcia points out, is that they're doing Cleopatra next. And after this movie, I still say that Gal Gadot is a fantastic choice for it. Patty Jenkins has to win me over.
Yeah, and there's already been some talk of Wonder Woman 3. There's already a rumor going around that they might use the Flashpoint to bring Steve back permanently.
Oh, God. Yeah, fine.
Diego Flores sends in 10 Peruvian souls. Thank you so much. He's got a question. Do you think that if DC can jumpstart their universe with Snyder Cut, that we might see them go to Universal Parks for their rides, especially if Nintendo World is a success? Buddy. Well, here's the thing, Diego. At least in the U.S., doesn't Warner already have their own theme park with Six Flags?
No, but Warner, they went to Universal with the Harry Potter world,
I
did
don't
they
think
not?
that was up to Warner, though. I think that was just because that's a separate deal that what's her face and whoever owns that shit made.
Yeah, I don't know, but
Because
honestly,
that's the thing is, as far as I know, I think unless they don't have anything to do with the parks anymore, but like, yeah, it used to be like the Batman ride and all the Looney Tunes and all that kind of crap are all at Six Flags.
I don't think it's going to be the kind of thing that they want to do rides from. But if they are, they're probably going to go to Universal because
Well, that
yeah,
was like the Marvel thing here. That deal was made prior to Disney or whatever. That's why that thing, yeah, because otherwise Disney's pissed about that. They wish they
yeah,
could shut it down.
yeah, exactly. They would be delighted to shut them down. Also, I don't think that Marvel deal says that. Oh, because since you have this Marvel deal, you can't get a DC deal. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm
We'll
not
see.
saying they wouldn't, but I would, yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah,
All I would say
and
is
I think they still do. So, yeah, there you go.
all I would say is be cautiously optimistic for your Snyder cut because um, there's no guarantees with the DC franchise at this point.
I think they're going to try and push the multiverse thing for a while and see how that works. I
Yeah,
think Joker really helped that scenario
Yeah,
quite a bit.
I would say that might be their best bet.
indeed, indeed. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And I think we got another super chat there, didn't we? Yeah, here. Curtis Tate says, did the Linda Carter cameo during the credits make any sense? I didn't get it. Script, you want to explain that one?
Well, it let's just put it this way: it kind of makes sense, but it's a very thin thing. Her character is created to justify the armor that Gal Gadot found during her 50 years wandering the Earth, I guess. And at the end, it was just kind of like a nice little wink and some stunt casting, really, to just kind of get the diehard fans of Wonder Woman from the 70s to I guess placate them or justify them liking the film because Linda Carter shows up at the end for one little thing, saving a kid. A lot of kids being saved in this movie. Yeah, I mean, it's weird to see her in this capacity when she still looks fine, and it just didn't feel like she was needed. They could have probably had a better character for her if they wanted to use that. Poor Linda Carter has been kind of being dragged around on first on casting things, especially within the DC universe on TV and in here in the film. I think it's kind of like bad form personally, but I mean it's not an out of left field thing. They kind of set it up. They tried to throw a bait and switch by making the color of the eyes for this character, this prior Wonder Woman, so to speak, by being green, but Linda Carter's eyes are very, very blue. Yeah, I don't think it does anything. It really was just added in there to justify the existence of the armor, which really paid off. And I'm being very sarcastic there. Like there's.
And Adam Wofford says, okay, remember Dueling Dragons ride in Universal Theme Park? It was supposed to be Double Dragon ride, but the license was pulled after the movie failed. Well, there you go. That's a nice way to salvage something, and they're going to do like the same kind of redressing on like Splash Mountain or whatever it is in the Disney World, aren't they? And on the subject of Disney, Fat Elvis says, still waiting for what's his name from Rogue One Star Wars show. That is filming now. That is filming.
Casio keyboard.
Yeah. The series will simply be called Andor, and it's coming in 2022, and it will consist of 12 episodes. Now, what I don't know is if at the end of 12 episodes, if it then will lead straight into Rogue One, or if it will lead into more seasons before we get to Rogue One. So that'll be interesting to see. Script, do you have any ideas about that?
I hope they're able to complete it. I hope they're able to get it out, and I really hope it's good. But that's all I can do. Hope's not really a strategy.
Oh, indeed. And Diego Flores sent us 10 more Peruvian souls saying, Tom, just checked. Warner sold 51% ownership of Six Flags in 1995. So technically not majority. Also, Six Flags had Warner characters since the 80s because of license and not ownership. So, yeah, that answers that.
All right, that answers that question.
Yeah.
The door is open, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
All right. Was there anything else you gentlemen wanted to discuss with this movie before we wrap it up? Or I know it's getting pretty late for you.
Yeah, it's getting pretty late for me, and I think we have said pretty much everything there is to say about this. One final thing. What did you think about the moral of the story? What did you take from that about what to wish and the power of wishes backfiring and everything? Did you take any lessons away from that script?
No. All I can say is I commend them for swinging for the fences and trying to do a message. They really should have read up on what it means to lie, what a wish really means, and what the truth really means, because they don't quite nail it. But I appreciate the effort. Good evening, sir.
And just as we were finishing up our thought,
I didn't realize
well, we were, but I'm sure we could hang on for a few more minutes here.
No, yeah, absolutely. When the script doctor said I didn't know you'd put me in the show, I was like looking down. You know?
Oh yeah,
but I was like, wow, script doctor was nailing it.
Yeah, we were not happy with Wonder Woman. How about you?
I thought it was wacky. It was just a wacky.
You're being nice.
Well, here's I
you know what my review is, my blurb. It's a clusterfuck of stupid.
Well, here's what I don't understand. As the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, okay, the first Wonder Woman is this movie is not about Wonder Woman. The first movie, it's all about her growing up and Themyscira and going into man's world and discovering, World War I, the war to end all wars, horrible trench warfare, this horrible European conflict that left so many people destroyed, and it was all about her. This movie is not about Wonder Woman. It's about, first of all, Maxwell Lord and Barbara Minerva, and she's just kind of on the outskirts, kind of looking in. It's not about her. And I thought that was like really odd. And I thought, like, knowing what this premise was, this first of all, the whole idea of wishes just is insane. It's such a weird, half-baked idea that makes literally no sense at all. And I don't know if this movie were only about, like, if this rock were something she discovered on her own, and she was the only person who knew about it, and she, against her better judgment, recreated Steve Trevor, and because of that, reality started to unravel or something, and it would be the monkey's paw, it would be, which Steve Trevor talks about, and it would be something that she herself, it was her wish that destabilized the universe or whatever. Then it would have been interesting. But as it stands, I mean, she didn't even mean to wish for Steve Trevor to come back. It was just something she was randomly, well, if you could wish for anything, what would you wish for? In passing, it was something she didn't even think was going to have any ramifications, because who would? But if it was something that she actually chose to do, and it was a wrong decision that she had made, that was selfish because I want to see Steve again. Lest we forget, I mean, she only knew Steve for what, a couple of weeks before he died?
Yeah.
And where's World War II in all of this? Where's Korea? Where's Vietnam? What has Wonder Woman been doing since the end of World War I?
She's been hung up on Steve Trevor. And to your point, if she conjured him up intentionally, you could throw in a great consequence, which is that he starts to rapidly age because he's supposed to be in sync with the time. So if he was born in like the late 1800s, which is presumably he is, like in the 1890s or something, he would be pushing 100 years old she has to come to terms with the fact that she kind of brought him back, but made him suffer a rapidly aging death.
Well, yeah, it's like Pet Cemetery. You know, you bury your pet or something like that, which is another variation of the monkey's paw. And what was so strange, they never figured out, like, what are the rules of wish fulfillment?
They only have one, and they never figured out the consequences properly, which is one person gets one wish.
Yeah, that was something I was kind of getting to, was how they didn't really stick to their rules real well. And
except if you're Kristen Wiig, you get two.
Yeah, then, well, no, see, here's the thing. She made a wish on the stone, and then she made a wish off of Maxwell Lord. But that was, so, I mean, I understood that, but still, the whole Maxwell Lord thing, and there was a bunch of points that we made already, Robert, that I think you would have been, probably either agreed with or thought were interesting, but
I just thought that why tell, of all the stories you can tell of Wonder Woman in the 80s, when you had the Reagan presidency, the height of the Cold War, AIDS had broken out. There was so many. First of all, the 1984 they conjured up, you would think that this series of films, World War I and what was going on in England and Europe at the time, was integral to the first Wonder Woman film. And it was her experiencing man's world during the war to end all wars. So if you're going to tell a second story, what did 1984, I'm going by the first film, what did 1984 have to do with Wonder Woman? Well, nothing.
Yeah.
And it was a movie version of 1984. It wasn't the I mean, 2 years later or 3 years later, we had Gordon Gekko on Wall Street. Which is Maxwell Lord was clearly, I mean, he was Ron Burkle. He was anybody who had those half an hour TV ads.
Yeah, Rob was bringing up a lot of those guys too.
Yeah. I brought up Tom Vu.
Right. Tom Vu's a perfect example. And all of that was lost because it was, I don't know. It was weird to me after one. I thought I really liked the first Wonder Woman. This film, I watched it and I'm like, what am I watching? Why
clusterfuck of stupid?
Well, it didn't make any sense to me. Like, Wonder Woman, why is she going out and watching the shopping malls for kids stealing things? Like, And if is she Washington D.C.'s only personal vigilante? She goes nowhere else. You know, we had the chemical explosion in Bhopal, India, that killed thousands of people.
You had Chernobyl in '86.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing I asked is where was she during Zod, for fuck's sake? If she's just able to hop out in the middle of a fucking mall, you know, and able to lasso and fly around all over hell easily in this movie, it really opens up that door to where the hell was she when half of Metropolis was being fucking just decimated.
Well, here's the other thing too. Why is she in DC? We don't know. Why is she there?
And she's still working at the Smithsonian 40 years later, and nobody's like, you haven't aged, but you're still working here at the Smithsonian.
At least in Highlander, they figured that shit out.
Yeah, and we don't even get a hint of exactly what she does. Like, I guess she gives us a title, but she's not working on anything. She's just kind of hanging out with Kristen Wiig's character because FBI.
Well, like I said, Kristen Wiig's character is pointless. What were you going to say, Rob? Rob?
Tom, you missed the biggest thing on Wonder Woman in the 80s was fighting the Cola Wars, and the most important war of all. She might as well have been. It's that dumb.
Well, like I made the point earlier, Robert, it's like, okay, you're going to set this movie in a time period. You have this big convoluted idea where Max Lord has to touch somebody to grant a wish. And he gets like, if I do this one at a time, it's going to take forever, blah, 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 blah. So he comes up with that convoluted idea to use the Star Wars satellites to touch everybody with particles. Robert, what happened to, I think it was either late 85 or summer of 86. I can't remember. Somewhere in that time period. What happened where a lot of people touched hands all at the same time?
We Are the World.
Well, not just that, but Hands Across America.
Oh, yeah, right. Which is in Us, the movie Us.
They could have set it up to where he came up with the idea, like he was doing it of some charitable thing, but it was really for him to try to just set up his whole convoluted thing. And just like I said, the easy fix for the ending, they waste his son's wish on him just being, you know, don't you wish your father was going to succeed or whatever? It's like, no, the ending should have been his kid going up to him and going, Dad, I just wish everything was back to the way it was. And that would have just undid everything.
Well, I mean, what I don't like is with something like this is there has to be some kind of an intellect. What I was saying on my own show today, when you have a leader of a country say, well, I want my country to be this great sovereign nation and all the infidels are gone. And then there's suddenly 1,000-foot wall.
Yeah. Then the wall thing. Yeah.
Who decide who is the intellect behind who is there at the wish fulfillment bureau when someone sends in a wish that when they make all of these, if you have a genie, you rub a lamp and a genie comes out, the genie becomes the intellectual conduit through which, you know, be careful what you wish for. So you know where the intellect is coming from. But if you make a wish asking for a sovereign nation, there wasn't 1,000-foot wall around the nation in the first place. So who in the wish fulfillment arena decides that let's put 1,000-foot wall around your country? Who decides that? And there's metallurgy there. There's environmental impact. Like suddenly there's just a giant wall. And I'm like, I know it's silly. It's wish fulfillment and all that. But really, there's now physical logistics behind your wish. And how does that work? Like, who decides that? As opposed to, what if it was just a moat? Why build a wall? What about air traffic? Like, does that mean, does the wall, do planes get to fly over your country now? Or is it only 1,000 feet up? It's so, nobody thought this through. And that's what I don't like, is that when you have such a crazy, fantastical conceit, you need to explain it. Otherwise, then if anything is possible, it's all just gobbledygook. And why bother?
Yeah, they throw up a wall probably because of a political statement, but they also don't consider the fact that he just wished for the infidels to vanish from his land. Why aren't people missing? Why aren't the reports going out? If they're not vanishing, why aren't they just actively deciding to move away, and it's causing other people to question those actions?
Again, none of it was really thought out, and none of it was, and that's what I didn't like about it. When I'm watching a fantasy or science fiction film or horror, I don't want to have to wonder about the rules that the filmmakers are setting out. And this wish fulfillment story has a lot of rules that they've set up. I mean, Maxwell Lord, you have this rock at first that he wants, and when he says, "Now I'm the rock," okay, well, we don't even know what properties the rock had in the first place, and now when you go, so you grant somebody a wish by getting them to touch you and make a wish, but then you then can then say, "Well, I want his whole security team now." How do you get to say that?
I also thought that was really weird how he was like, okay, I'm going to wish for that. And I'm going to hope that the interpretation of that wish is this thing that I'm thinking about, which I would never have guessed. Like, why would he just not simply turn into a rock that has no properties whatsoever?
Yeah.
Well, Andre, that's a really, really good point.
Yeah. Well,
And-
yeah, the
and-
whole thing is, and like I said, I think that they. Sorry, Robert. I was just going to say, like
No.
we were talking earlier, was I feel like the half hour that should have been cut out of the movie is left in, and the half hour of all the context we needed for all this stuff that we're talking about right now was cut out. I don't know if that's how you felt too, but yeah, like they have no setup for any of this stuff.
Well, I felt it was strange because the story wasn't about Diana. She's just reacting to all this other stuff that's happening, and
what?
it wasn't her story.
I found myself much more intrigued by which deity is the one that that invented this thing right here, and what's the story behind that. That honestly was much, much more interesting to me.
Why wasn't he a
than
character? Why
anything
wasn't
in the
that
story?
Where's that character? We saw Ares. It's not like we don't in the Wonder Woman movie. I kept, like you said, Andre, I was waiting for that. Is it the devil? Is it the
They
devil?
say it's basically like a Loki type god,
Right, but
No. We guessed that because here's the
Well,
thing.
they explain
They
the
don't
god.
say
But she says his name, but I couldn't catch it. She's like, because she says it in that one part where she's like, "Yeah, he's a trickster and he does this and that." Da, 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 da.
But why do we not see him in the last Wonder Woman movie? Ares is a character, and if this is like this whole Wonder Woman scenario is based on a previously existing pantheon of gods, so why would they be so cagey about it? And why wasn't that? I mean, I would love to have seen a character show up at the end. It would emulate or mirror the first film. And this whole thing is by not having his presence or her presence or its presence, they completely undercut everything that's going on. And it was weird to me that, you have the one guy, they like go to some random Mayan descendant's house in Washington, D.C., some guy who's smoking the weed and he's like
yoga.
teaching yoga, and yeah, here's my grandfather's book or whatever. And here's when the Mayans got this thing and they all disappeared, man. Like that was so weird and random. Like, so the last time anyone had this was when the Mayans disappeared. Okay, well, so who's behind it?
Yeah, that was much more interesting. Like, there would have been a story, even if it was like fictional.
There's your missing villain. Instead they shoved Kristen Wiig in this. And Robert, that goes to another point. Like, she was pointless in this movie because I was explaining the plot to somebody earlier today, and I got to near the end of the movie when I realized, oh yeah, by the way, Kristen Wiig's in this because she has nothing to do in this movie really. Like, they could have just cut her out completely. And I think you're right. They would have been better off having another character in there like that, even though I did not like the reveal at the end of the first film and I hate how they handled the character. I think you're right. Like, you needed somebody who was like behind this to begin with, or another person like you could have put in there that was like that Loki type character or something. Yeah.
Well, what's also really interesting if you go by the first film, so when Diana comes to man's world and she comes across Steve and his cadre of men, they already exist. Like, they've already had a life. They're already doing their work behind enemy lines. They all know each other. They've been working together for a long time. So she's kind of dropped into the action. Well, in this movie, we're watching, like, I understand that they're trying to actually make a movie that comes from the 1980s. I think that's what they were trying to do. But it was like this Barbara Minerva character was a caricature out of a movie from the 80s. I didn't believe her for a minute. You know, they're just telling you, oh, she trips over her heels, so she's this nebbishy character that we're supposed to recognize from a dozen other different films. She never felt like a fully realized character. She was a caricature. She was a caricature of characters we met in 80s movies. And she wasn't developed at all. She was Selena Kyle. She was Poison Ivy. She was, and it was just weird. The whole thing was bizarre. I'm like, why am I watching a second-rate version of characters that have already been previously established in other DC movies and other 80s comedies? It was bizarre. And it wasn't worthy of what we saw in the first Wonder Woman.
No, it absolutely was not. Like, as I said earlier, to me, this felt like Super Mario Brothers 2. Like a slightly dreamlike, non-canon sequel that yeah, sure, there was a demand for a sequel, but not this sequel, and the whole thing was kind of like pointless in the end. Because yeah, okay, say you get like a new Wonder Woman every 3 years or so. So each and every single movie is like pretty prime real estate, and you have to be careful with what you do with the screen time there. Like here, you could have milked like a whole Wonder Woman trilogy, and that's gone now because there's no Wonder Woman trilogy. There will never be, because this whole movie right here was a complete nothing, a complete waste of time. You can not see it, and your life will probably be better for it.
Well, you know, I kept thinking when I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, if the next Wonder Woman film, I'm sure they didn't do this because of Captain America, but if they had made a movie set in World War II that dealt with the atomic bomb, for instance, what happens when a child of Zeus has to confront when man wields the power of the gods, which is, say, nuclear power? The ability to wield the atom is something that's beyond the Amazons. In fact, it's beyond Ares. But man has suddenly figured out how to, the very fabric of the universe, which is atomic power, which is beyond the gods, and man figured it out.
That's a story.
That's a story. So what does Wonder Woman do? When man now has nuclear power to wield and is going to use it, and this now threatens all of the Amazons, you know, and if man were to ever wanted to get rid of the Amazons, man is now in possession of power that even the Amazons can't be protected from. Wouldn't that have been an interesting story? And that would have been Diana's, you know, and again, that's what Ares wanted. You know, Ares was pitting man against man, and now Ares put mankind on a path where they now wield the power of the gods, which is the power of the atom. Wouldn't that have been an interesting story?
Yeah.
And that Diana cannot allow this to happen, and she loses in the end. In the end, Nagasaki and Hiroshima are nuked, and that sets up whatever, you know, whatever the story was in World War II. And I was just thinking that for me, I can't help but think back to why go to 84? Why go to 1984? Had nothing to do with the story in this movie.
No.
Other than the fashion and even the music. Look,
they didn't even lean into the music at all.
I loved hearing Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Welcome to the Pleasure Dome. I used that in my own movie in 1999. And I'm like, they didn't even the number one songs of that era are not even in this movie, like Time After Time.
Well, I think they got the whole like 80s thing way off. First of all, like most of the fashions was stuff that was more late 80s, early 90s, and then on top of that, I brought up the point like it was an 80 movie. It was a movie about the 80s in the 80s. It's weird because like not everybody dressed that way. Like
and there were not break dancers outside of every door you walked out of.
Like I even brought up the scene in Beverly Hills Cop, like the whole point when like when Axel Foley's walking down the street and he sees the two guys in head to toe leather and he laughs because not everybody dressed like that. Yeah, few people did, but like you go into that mall and then like I was talking to Rob about it, like you have this whole a whole segregation of punks, and then you have the break dancers, and then you have the the people that are in all the like parachute pants and all that kind of. It's like not everybody was like dressing like that at the time. It was just stupid. Anyway,
No, that was movie realm 80s. It's funny you bring up Beverly Hills Cop because that came out in 1984.
Well, that was the thing, is we said a bunch of movies from like 84, like Gremlins, and then Back to the Future, which was a year later. But again, very similar. Like the fashions are subdued. Ghostbusters, another one. Yeah.
No, they don't. They didn't pay attention to the 80s. They took the decade as a whole and crammed it into one particular year without understanding that it changed from year to year. And on top of that too, like, okay, they put Wonder Woman in this like really lavish, very postmodern 80s apartment, but there is an existing building in Washington that was used in the original show and was also the same brownstone that Murphy Brown's character lived in. And they didn't even call that in because that would have been something that would fit within line of what was used before within Wonder Woman. I think they even used that exact house in some of the comic books in the 80s as well. Like, that's where Diana lived. She lived in this brownstone in Washington, D.C. as she was working for the government. But now she's not working for the government. She's working for the Smithsonian. But she's got this lavish apartment. She's got this CCTV network in her closet for some reason.
Well, also, you know, if you go back and use Connor McLeod and use Highlander as an example, why is Diana in a job where she's so publicly visible and her not aging, you know, as the years go by, she's still doing the same shit in Batman v Superman 30 years later? You know, and you'd think that why is the Smithsonian's Diana Prince haven't aged in 30 years? I mean, it's such a weird, it was all bizarre, and I don't understand why it wound up this way. I guess with all the people having worked on films with incredible production designers and how they look, it felt like, okay, we're just going to go to a mall. Like, could that be? They went to a mall in Valley Girl in 1983. I mean, even then, even in the 80s, they were making fun of 80s culture. But to go back from 2018, 2019, when they were making this movie, to go back to, it's like mall culture twice removed. It's not even.
Yeah.
I mean, malls were big in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, another big film. Valley Girl. These were movies in the 80s that were taking place in malls. And to go back.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree completely with you. They made the wrong movie here. And I think it is astounding that you just did it right there with, like, go back to World War II and humankind now has nuclear weapons. Only there, that's a million times better story than what they came up with right here, because that's actually true. Like, people today have forgotten just how dangerous and what kind of technological marvels a nuclear bomb actually is.
Yeah, you can even go into the Flock of Seagulls incident in the 50s with the LiDAR, where it triggered the auto response. Like, that's part of Cold War.
Not just that, like, I mean, like, Robert, you brought up all the other wars that she's just passed over here, and that, you know, not to jump again on what I would have done, but, you know, that's where I said the one flaw I felt like in the end of Wonder Woman is they should have made Ares her dad, and that way, you know, even though she kills Ares, the reason why war continues is because she's still alive and she's technically the god of war now, and that's why she feels guilty and that's why she gets involved. And putting her in something like Vietnam would have been interesting, because then she gets to sit there and say to the Americans, look, you are in the wrong here. You know, there's a very, you know, a lot of different things she could have done in that era. And, like, you know, guys were saying with nuclear war and all this other things, and she doesn't have a great rogues gallery. So you might as well kind of jump on the whole idea that she is, you know, a god, or, you know, or has gods in that you can use as bad guys and stuff. Sorry, you were going to say something. Yeah.
Well, it's just that, look, this franchise began as a historical period piece. And so if you're watching a second film, the question is asked. I mean, you cannot tell me that Diana, who's now living in man's world, she hasn't had another love since Steve Trevor. I mean, this is ludicrous. You know, the thing about Tony Scott's first film, The Hunger, which came out in 1983, is about a vampire named Miriam Blaylock. All right, she's 2,000 years old. And every couple of 100 years, she takes a new lover. She's had male lovers, she's had female lovers, but it's about companionship, because when you're immortal, life is lonely. And in that film, David Bowie is her companion, John Blaylock, who's been with her for hundreds of years, over 300 years, and he starts rapidly aging. But you see flashbacks into her life when she first met people, and she was in ancient Egypt. I mean, what the hell has Diana been doing since World War One?
Yeah.
And this is the filmmakers have set up this expectation to the question is, you can't sit there and tell me that she's done is loved Steve Trevor, that not one dude has fascinated her in the 60 plus or whatever, how many years since World War One.
Right.
There's been some amazing there's been statesmen. I mean, what would Diana be doing? She'd be traveling the world. She would be involved in all facets of human history because she's just hanging out at the Smithsonian? What was she doing before?
She's talking over the first guy she had sex with.
No, and like I brought up, like Highlander did it so much better. And I said the other thing was, and that was what we started the whole thing off with, is like, I think we can all agree the whole reason they went with this whole convoluted wish plot was just so they had an excuse or a way to bring Chris Pine back, right? I said, there's a way around that. There's an easy way around that. All you had to do was have a guy that she runs into who kind of looks like Steve and is played by Chris Pine, but you change his hair, you make him not related in any way to Chris Pine's character. You just have him be his own character. And then you have the whole thing is she she's got a question. Am I attracted to this guy because he reminds me of Steve? Or am I attracted to him because you just have his character be like the exact opposite of Steve or something like that? You know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds of different things you could have done instead of this convoluted plot to bring Steve back. That's really what this wish thing was. I mean, let's be real here.
It just diminishes her as a character.
Right.
What is she? Is she a 14-year-old girl? Mooning after
we were joking, like Az and I and everybody else was joking. The whole movie's about her needing the D for the whole movie, and then at the end, it's her getting rid of the D. That's how she wins. That's what it was. She was longing for dick for 70 years, and she got her dick, and then the strength was to be able to let the dick go.
But I mean, she's lived through 20th century history, which has been horrific. I mean, since World War One, the rise of communism in 1918. You know what happened in the Soviet Union, and what happened in Nazi Germany. And the Holocaust, like 12 million people exterminated in concentration camps. Where was Diana then? And the filmmakers undercut their own credibility by moving it into 1984 and turning it into a wank fest. And it's like, are you telling me that this character that we're supposed to love and admire has sat out the world since the end of World War One? Like the Balkan conflict. Oh, well, that was later. But I mean, everything that happened in the 20th century, the most horrific period in terms of more human beings murdered, tens of millions of people, including the advent of the nuclear bomb and all of this. She was nowhere to be found. What does that say about her as a character? Oh no, she's in the mall in 1984, stopping robberies. Well, really, I'd love to know where you were during World War II, or when Stalin killed 20 million of his own people, and the Germans systematically killed 12 million, 6 million Jews, and another 12 million degenerates. Where were you then, Diana? Why isn't that part of it? Fuck you, you bitch. You let humanity down. I don't give a fuck that you're in the malls in 1984.
No, and I brought up a lot of those points too. Yeah, like
I mean, it's in a way it's offensive.
Yeah, you're not wrong, not at all.
No, well, I know, Andre. I know you got to check out here soon because it's getting late for you, and we have some super chats here to run through as well. Did you want to jump out first, Andre? Or
yeah, no, I'll jump out first. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone watching, and just stay tuned because I'll be leaving, but the show will go on, so to speak. And also, Mr. Burnett, thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure when.
Well, I love getting the invitations. So thanks, Tom, for sending it. I'm like, oh, are you guys still on?
Yeah, we are now. We still got a few super chats to go through, so we're going to stick around for a few more minutes at least. And so we'll bid Andre adieu, but we're not going anywhere yet. Let's see. The last super chat we had here was from Mihan. He says, barbed wire plus Batman and Robin equals Wonder Woman 84. And thanks for the kazoo. Yeah, Rob played a little kazoo for him. You're not wrong there, except for Batman and Robin was a little bit more entertaining. This had so many lulls and drags. Like when we first started the review, I can't believe how many people said in the chat they fell asleep during the movie. There's at least a half a dozen.
I had to go back.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think the only reason I stayed awake is because I think I was like wrapping gifts and stuff and doing other things while I was watching it. But anyway, our next super chat comes from Adam Mulford. There was a story where the USSR made their Wonder Woman to fight the original Wonder Woman, and she invaded the Amazon island and almost took over. See, yeah, there's a lot of different things you could have done, right? There's another better story than what we got. Evergence, if I'm saying that right, says, and all Reagan wishes for is nukes, nothing personal, nothing for Nancy, for his health since he had Alzheimer's. Yeah, that was the other thing they made that Reagan type character. Was he even Reagan or was he a Reagan character-ish?
They didn't make him that much like Reagan.
So I don't think they ever called him by name, so I don't remember. Yeah. So yeah, well, pretty much everybody's wishes are pretty stupid. Stop Spy on Me says, many of your observations are what I call schizophrenic filmmaking. If you think it's bad now, just wait as more angry female directors with grudges against the industry come up in the ranks. Yeah, not only that, it seems like a very amateurish storytelling in a lot of ways. And yeah, I don't know. Script, what do you think to that since you're a professional in that arena?
Well, I've never heard of Patty Jenkins ever being upset with the industry. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some issues there. But I would say, yeah, like this is bad screenwriting. Like I've been giving warnings of this movie for like a year, at least online. Dave Callahan, he's the guy who wrote the Doom movie with The Rock, and a bunch of others, and probably the worst comedy I'd ever written called America. Ever read called America, which I think won or placed in the Nickel Fellowship. I don't know how. It's really bad. But for some reason, he was the main screenwriter of this. Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns helped him with the story ideas, gave him the notes of what he had to put in, and he did not do a great job weaving it together. He gave us no heart, no soul. I don't understand what Max Lord wants. I don't know what Diana really wants. I kind of know what Kristen Wiig's character wants, but there's no development with that. There's no consequences at the end. There's no consequences at the end of this movie at all. Like he hugs his son, and then we go to the credits. And it's like nobody's asking about all the damage that's occurred because that hasn't been reset. Like all the chaos that's going around.
Does anyone remember this? Like in the rest of the DCEU, when Batman v Superman happens, does anyone remember the nuclear Armageddon where all the missiles just disappeared?
Yeah. Remember that wall in Egypt for no reason?
Well, that's what I said earlier. Where the hell was she during when Zod was destroying half of Metropolis? Doyle.
Well, what about the fact that she's whipping her lasso to try and get to the energy field that Maxwell Lord is standing in, and it won't go in, yet out of nowhere it's already hooked onto his ankle?
There's a lot of that. And then like after she saves those kids, it goes from her losing grip of it or whatever to it being on her waist too. There's a lot of that crap in the movie. Doyle Hargraves says the after credit scene was better than the movie. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Did you catch that, Robert? The
Linda Carter scene.
Carter scene, yeah.
But again, what does that have to do with the rest of the movie that we're watching?
She was the character that was in the iron or the suit or whatever you call it.
She was in the gold suit that Princess Diana. That Diana Prince found.
I get it, but like, so
she's supposed to be in the next one, I guess. She's like the prototype Wonder Woman, I'm assuming.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's stunt casting. That's what it is. It's
Mr. Tickle Trunk sent us a puppy sticker. Thank you so much. Diego Flores says, so we are returning to self-contained comic stories in movies model like those in the animated side of DC as a way to create DC superhero live action movies. Kind of, sort of. So you got to understand, this is a child of we're trying to move away from the Snyderverse era. And then now we're in this kind of like, I think DC's kind of after the failure of Birds of Prey and the success of Joker, I think they're kind of just waiting to see how the Snyder Cut fares. and then they'll probably decide after that
And they
how
also
they're
have
gonna.
Shazam and Aquaman doing fairly decent as
They
well.
did
Like,
okay,
they're in
yeah.
a weird they're in a weird place.
Yeah, they weren't exactly. I mean, we yeah, technically in the same universe, but not. It's kind of, they're kind of their own thing at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that going forward. Not a Band account says, did the bad guy seem a lot like Trump to you? There was a few things we said that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think this was more towards you, Robert, since you were new to the conversation. Did he seem like Trump to you at all?
Not really. Uh, Being that like in the 80s, especially Donald Trump, I read his book, Art of the Deal. I mean, him and Ivanka Trump, or Ivana Trump, his wife, they were a very different kind of it's weird because if you feel that way, it's because they wanted to imbue that character with the idea that he was Trumpian some way, but he really wasn't. I mean, he was an infomercial guy, and when we first meet him, his empire, quote unquote, is crumbling. Whereas Trump was the son of a very rich real estate investor, and in the 80s he was all over the place. People forget that Trump's been on the social scene, part of American pop culture, for 35 years at least, and it's only been recently that he's sort of different than he used to be. So I didn't see Maxwell Lord as Trump. I saw him as Mr. Vu. Who brought that up? Rob,
Yeah, who actually has to get going here anyway. So there you go. Rob, that's your cue.
Yeah. The Tom Vu seminar. Yeah, Tom Vu once said, most famously, that people will say to you, "Don't listen. This is a get-rich-quick scheme." And I say, "Of course it is, because life is too short to get rich slow." Words to live by, seems. All right, everybody, but I gotta jump. Robert, always great to talk to you guys. Have a great rest of the show. I gotta take care of a few things. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, take care, Rob. All right, moving on to our next super chat. Where did I leave off here? Dark King 616 says it's an 80s film without rampant steroids. It's not an 80s film. Yeah, there's not enough steroids in the movie for it to be an 80s movie. That's true. Roger Haynes says, I noticed there was an arcade machine of Operation Wolf in the movie, which wasn't even released till 87. Yeah, same thing with Rampage, which didn't come out till 86. I don't know if you noticed any of those, Robert, at all. There was a ton of anachronisms.
Yeah, no, I did.
A ton. I mean, you could probably go all day long and find a half a dozen more, if not even more than that. Diego Flores also says City of Heroes has a better storyline in its minute of background info to set up the world of MMO than this movie. Yeah, I haven't really played that much, but I'm aware of it. I don't know if you guys have played City of Heroes at all.
A long time ago, actually.
Yeah, when it first came out, I think. Yeah,
I played it very little, so I'm not too familiar with it, but I do know of it. So, yeah, I'm sure we can all agree there. Ricky Desert Flower sends in $5 super chat. Says, "Loved your insight, Robert. Are you also an author? Would love to read them. Meaning, if you have any books."
No,
I'm surprised you don't actually. To be honest,
it is one of my. I'll tell you something. I wrote one short story in my life that I submitted to Twilight Zone magazine in the 80s. My first short story, they accepted it, and I still have it. I have the letter that says, "We loved your short story," and then the magazine went out of business like 3 months later before it published. But I do have my acceptance letter, and the story was about a kid in the 5th grade who discovers that the Grim Reaper, that death lives in his small town, and he finds this out because one day when he's walking to work, he peeks in on a stone cutter that carves the names in tombstones, and he sees his teacher, his 5th grade teacher's name carved into a tombstone, who hasn't died yet. And the story was called Etched in Stone.
That's a kind of cool little setup, yeah.
And it goes from there. But that was the one and only short story I ever wrote and submitted it to someone. And it was to the Twilight Zone magazine, because I love the Twilight Zone magazine in the 80s. And I got my letter back saying it was accepted. I was stoked. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be a published author. But
you should do something with that.
maybe. I mean, I did I did co-write the screenplay for Free Enterprise, but other than that,
Right. No, but I mean, yeah, that story, you should do something with it. If not, you should actually. Like I said, I'm surprised you haven't written a book or a series of short stories or anything like that.
writing books is hard.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But I mean, like putting together a few short stories. No, that might be not.
Well, I'm running a short story contest on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, that part's true. But I mean, your own personal work would be.
Yeah, I'm going. You know, I
I'd
was
be all
thinking
over
about
it.
actually updating that story and putting it in the book itself. But yeah, no, I've never. My dream, I've actually my dream in life. One of the dreams I haven't done is to write a horror novel. I want to write a dark fantasy
And you could do that so easily,
horror
sir.
novel.
You have the audience. You can do it.
I have I have the story. I have the title, but I can't decide. I started writing it as a screenplay, and which I would still love to make. But
Do the book first, and then you have the screenplay.
Yeah, I know. Then have
There you go.
Yeah.
Diego Flores comes in again. Oh, we already read that one. Sorry. The next one here is Rocky Desert Flower. You got that one. All right. I think we are caught up then on the super chats, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. Because if that's the case, then I think we can probably close things out here, because we've been going for a little while, and I know you were streaming a little bit earlier too, Robert. So yeah, we want to thank you for hopping in and giving us your thoughts on Wonder Woman. It was nice to get a little
I just
bit
feel
different
bad when you
thought
send me
about
a link and I only come in
it.
after
Oh
you've been on
no,
for an hour.
I knew you were live earlier, but we couldn't wait too much longer because of Andre being so late. But
Right.
no, we always love having you, and we would have totally waited for you to be done and just had you hop in with us when we first started if we could have. But no, it's always fun to have you, and of course, Script Doctor as well. So check out the Burn Network and Script Doctor's channels. They will appreciate your subscription if you have not done so. Anything to say, boys, before we leave? Script?
Man, I was actually looking forward to this kind of not being as poor as it was, although I do know the history of the writer, but I was really hoping they'd pull something out. And they didn't. If you love this movie, that's how I will support the heck out of you for loving this movie, because I can't. Like, if you hate it, again, I'll support the heck out of you for hating it. But yeah, for me, it just did not land. A lot of missed opportunities, a lot of confusion. Yeah, I wish this was good. This would have been a highlight of the year if it was. Absolutely. But no, I'm just disappointed mostly. Yeah.
Robert?
Well, again, too, I mean, I think that if people love things, I mean, everyone comes at things from a different perspective. And look, if you like something, you should grab a hold of that, never apologize for it, and love it for all the joy that it gives you. I think only because I consider myself a student of storytelling, and it's something that will never end. I have been since I was a little kid, especially because I've read thousands of comics and thousands of books. I go into everything wanting to love them, but there's a lot to live up to, and there's more each and every day. There's more movies, there's more TV shows, there's more books, there's more comics every single day than there ever was the day before. And so when you decide to do something like this, there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of preconceived notions and things that people have to come to grips with. And you need to be up to the task. That the world will no longer accept movies that don't deliver, because there's too many things these days that do deliver. So I think all filmmakers have to make sure they bring their A game and really think about what it is that they're doing.
No, you bring up a really good point, because I believe it was Gary Tunnicliffe who said it on one of our shows. He said, your movie is a producer, because he's like, I was worried about, or maybe it was Tom Conkle or Gary Tunnicliffe. It was one of those two. It was either Tom Conkle or Gary Tunnicliffe. I apologize to the either or one that I'm getting it wrong, but they were working on a film and they were talking to one of the producers about worrying about if the movie was good or not, or if it was going to work with an audience. And the producer said, look, your movie has to be as good as Avatar. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, they're paying the same price to see your movie as they were paying to see Avatar. So as long as it's as entertaining as Avatar, that's all that matters. You know, and I know that's a tall order, but it doesn't mean your movie has to be as expensive or as big as Avatar.
Well,
It
You're
has to
just
be
rating
entertaining.
yourself against the best of what's out there, and that's what you have
Exactly.
to do. And I think that's what
Exactly.
Hollywood hasn't been doing for a while. Is there's like, well, at least it's not this bad. And I just like that's a backwards mentality. It's got to be, wow, Avatar was the biggest thing there. We got to do something better than that and a lot cheaper.
Mhm.
well, also, I think a point needs to be made that something needs to know what it is. Like, people have criticized me because I'm a huge fan of the Fast and the Furious franchise. And I've said to people, I said, Fast 5 is the Citizen Kane of Fast and the Furious movies. And people are like, what does that mean? I said, well, look, the Fast and the Furious franchise began as this upscale B movie franchise. It was a ripoff of Point Break, but it was still based in an old movie from the 50s or whatever. But it knows what it is. It's delivering something on its own terms. When you get to Fast 5, if you get to Fast 5, and I love Tokyo Drift, if you get to Fast 5, you expect a certain thing from that movie, and Fast 5 delivers. And now I'm talking about, if you like the Fast and the Furious franchise, if what it is, if you get to Fast 5, it gives you everything you thought you could ever achieve or get out of that franchise. It was never meant to be high art, but it always knew what it was. I would dare say by the time you get to Fate of the Furious, it's gone way too far. When they're outrunning torpedoes, it's ridiculous. But Fast 5, no. Fast 5 was... So a franchise doesn't have to be high art. It only has to understand what it is.
Yep. Deliver.
And Wonder Woman 84 is following up the wonderful Wonder Woman. I didn't ask them to go into World War II. I didn't ask them to show me the No Man's Land sequence when Wonder Woman is running trench warfare and all of that entails. If you're a history buff, World War I sucked. I didn't ask them to go that route. But what I'm expecting is, if you did go that route, which they did, your second movie needs to deliver on the expectation you yourselves set up for the audience.
Yep. That's very
And
true.
if you don't do it, or don't blame the audience for not digging your film, because you have to live up to what you did before.
Yeah. Thunderstorm says, what happened to basic writing and storyboarding? It feels very similar to the new Star Wars style of confusing writing I don't understand. Yeah, I don't know what happened to this movie or what possessed them to go this route. But again, we have another movie where, jumping off of whether or not I liked it or not, I know a lot of people did, and it did very well in the box office, and it was very well received. I can't see this film doing nearly as well as the first film did among the masses. So, yeah. Does Cheetah sniff Wonder Woman's hair, at least? Not that I recall, Fillmore. The little dinner scene was a little lesbian heavy, but outside of that, no. They didn't have much for those two to do together. It was really kind of forced.
No, that dinner scene was terrible because it's them telling us about themselves as opposed to a proper conversation. Like Kristen Wiig's character says, she falls in love with everybody, but we never see her fall in love with anyone until Maxwell Lord comes in. We don't see her on a date. We don't see her getting mistreated by a boyfriend that doesn't really care about her. Like, we don't see anything to make us really understand what it is they're talking about there. And that entire scene, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, where she goes out to dinner by herself. Why? Like, what?
That's a great point,
that.
Script. And I'll tell you this right now. You know what? You just reminded me of something that's like writing 101. They don't show us anything about this character to make us care about her. They show things happening to her. And isn't that one of the biggest faux pas or
well, they tell us
make in writing?
Yeah, they tell us things, they don't show us so much.
Yeah, well, not just that, but like the first thing that really kind of happens to her that is supposed to get us on her side is when she gets attacked or whatever, and Wonder Woman saves her, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, the entire movie is just things happening to her. We don't actually learn anything about her, period. I mean, what is it? Tell me one thing about her character other than she worked at the fucking museum.
For Wonder Woman or Minerva?
No, Kristen Wiig's character. Tell me one thing. You can't, because there's nothing about her character. We don't even really get an inclination that she has a tendency towards cats, other than in her office she has a stuffed cat.
Well, look at Wonder Woman going out to dinner by herself,
Yeah,
sitting
that
in the
too.
most visible position she can sit in. She's an incredibly beautiful woman in the middle of a public space where she's sitting alone by herself, and she's not going to get noticed. Like, how does she live? Like, how does she, like, does she go to the grocery store? It's 84. Like, she's somebody who's so striking, you can't not miss her. And yet she sits there and, oh, well, I have nobody. I'm eating dinner. I'm eating dinner in the most public placement locale I can possibly be in. And I'm going to eat dinner by myself.
And she's dressed to the nines.
Dressed
in
the
her
nines.
casual-
I'm like, like no baseball hat. I mean, she looks amazing. And if she's all alone, do you think not 10 dudes are going to walk up to her? Hey,
Well,
babe,
they
what's
had
up?
that in the movie, but every guy was like rapey that did talk to her. Just same thing with Kristen Wiig too. Like, yeah.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's then why not go out in public if you don't want people to know who you are?
I know. And Average Joe says HBO Max overpay for this. Well, actually, it was a lost leader for them. The only people who did get any money out of it were Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins, who got basically paid off in a way they would have been paid off for their points had the movie went to theaters. But they got way overpaid, if you ask me, because this movie would not have made very much money. I think that the bad word of mouth would have really killed the second weekend on this. What do you guys think? And then we'll check out of this conversation, I think. What do you think the overall would have been on this one had it gone to theaters in a normal setting? I think it would have petered out around 400 or 500 million after word of mouth. What do you guys think, Robert?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think it would have had a really huge opening weekend. 150 to 200 million probably because people's anticipation. But I think it would have had a pretty big drop off because I think the very conception of the story is not compelling to people. Wonder Woman wasn't. She was reacting the whole movie. She wasn't being proactive, and
she had no goal. She had no goal. And here's the other part too. Like some people are saying, "Oh, screw plot, screw like character, all this other stuff." It's like if you screw those, you don't have a movie. You just have set pieces like that follow one after the other. You see the writer's hand, you see the director's hand manipulating and pulling the characters through. And plot is a byproduct of character actions and goals. And Diana has no goal. She's just living herself day to day. I don't care about her. I don't sympathize with her. She's hung up on the very first guy she met, literally, which is not very pro women, in my opinion. And it's just why are we following her at this point? And the same goes for all the other characters. They have no wants or goals, and none of those wants or goals really, because they're not defined, there's no conflicts between them. And when there's no conflict, you don't really have a story. And the whole concept of story is to overcome a conflict and learn something from that. And they don't even get their messaging right.
Well, also, wouldn't it have been interesting to spend the first 10 minutes of the film in exploring her life, not just in DC, but does she feel an obligation to the greater world around her? And obviously she did. That's another thing that bothered me. Why is she like in a mall helping people? A mall in DC. Is there nowhere else in the world that needs her more than this mall?
Yeah, wasn't there an issue with the Contras?
I get it to a point. Like they're trying to probably play it off like, oh yeah, she was around doing itty bitty things, but she was staying out of the limelight and bullshit. It doesn't matter. The moment you have her out in public doing anything, I think that opens up all kinds of problems from the very start.
Why that mall?
Yeah.
Why not the Mall of
exactly.
America?
Yeah.
Why is she? Is it just because it's in her neighborhood? Like you would think that what would have been interesting is that Wonder Woman, with all of her powers, would have been a citizen as she was introduced, a citizen of the world. Like what we saw in Batman v Superman. I go back and think of that portrayal. She's traveling. She's a global citizen. At this point, she would have passports for every country, probably different aliases. She'd be one of the most badass people on the planet. And yet, no, I got this job. working at the
You know,
Smithsonian.
you're right. Like, if you were going to do this right, like, if you wanted to have it to where, like, okay, she probably would have popped up here and there in history, but not so much. Like, if she's in one concentrated area, especially for a long time, like you pointed out, she's going to get noticed. But if you put her in, like, a position where she's like a Bond or something like that kind of character, going around trying to figure out things with, like, all these artifacts and stuff, because, like, that's obviously her job, you know, in the daytime, like, that would open up the door for her to go all over the world, you know, jumping around. And then when she turns into Wonder Woman, one place here, one place there, and the other, it doesn't cause as much of a stir as opposed to where she turns into Wonder Woman, what, 5 times in the matter of a fucking span of a week in DC there.
She speaks every language on the planet.
Exactly.
Why isn't she embedded, or why doesn't she know every single world leader? I mean, I would have opened this movie if I'd made this film and show her involved in world politics. Like, she's this shadow thing unto herself where she walks in and, like, she's listening. She's like, you know what? I don't want to talk to you about what's happening, even though I know what's happening. I think you should do the right thing and then leave. You know, like, she knows everyone.
Or like a private contractor for one.
Yes, she's a private contractor of one, knowing the entire planet Earth. And her whole thing is, and how you tie it in, you show the opening scene, and then the next thing is she's like, I don't think you're telling me the truth. You know, and she has the ability, even though it's her lasso, her whole character, her superpower is to elicit the truth, which she learned the importance of as a young girl in these competitions. She would have been the one person that, but she can't do it all. The world gets away from her. And yet there's none of that. They could have done something. Even in Batman v Superman, she's portrayed as a character who is a woman of the world. She knows everything that's going on because that's her business to know.
Yeah. Well, that's at least one thing that movie got right, even though she was kind of pointless in that too. Just Your Average Joe says, the beginning of the film with her swinging around and saving people was way too Spider-Man for me. Yeah, you're not the only person to say that, Joe. I've heard quite a few other people say the same thing, so you're not alone in that feeling at all. So yeah, I think with that, I think that's a good place to break out of here, even though we could talk about this all night long, I'm sure. But I know you've been streaming for a while, Rob, and I'm sure people are going to be starting other streams too, so I don't want to stream over too many people here. But I do appreciate you coming in. As always, it's a treat and a blast to get to hang out with you and talk to you about anything when it comes to entertainment. So thank you so much for hopping in here again.
Well, I love doing this stuff with you guys, and Script and we need to talk about our little script idea.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. Let's do that after the show real quick.
Yeah.
Check out these guys' channels, and also thanks for Script as always for spending time with us as well. And thanks to you guys for spending time with us, because without you, we'd just be talking